Okay. I just wanted to show you. It should be over.
$229 million that the voters approved.
You want to pass that up?
Sure. We have hard copies of the presentation that you are going to have in front of you, so I don't know if you prefer hard copies or...
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah,
That way you can write on
it's okay. If you get closer, it's
Matthew, we're a little hot on the mics. Getting a little feedback. Thank you.
And I forgot to give you the thumbs up. I am so sorry. I knew I would. Did you get him squared away? Yeah, I did.
Oh, wait, one more here. Got enough? I'll give you mine, Sandra, when we're done. Go get one.
It's,
Did everybody else get one? We're good?
so short, so I don't know. All right. Okay. Good afternoon, Dr. Birdwell, board members. Thank you for having us here today. As Laura mentioned, my name is Megan Burke. I'm with RBC Capital Markets. Sorry, we are your financial advisor, the district's financial advisor. We have been working with your chief financial officer on your debt plan, which includes the next issuance of bonds from your 2016 authorization. Your $229 million, as well as the potential for a refunding of some outstanding debt that the district currently has. So what we're going to present to you today is the refunding, how it works, and why you should look to move forward with a resolution on the refunding. At the meeting next week, we will have two resolutions in front of you. One will be on the sale of the next issuance of new money bonds. The second will be for the refunding component. We've done that in two separate resolutions for a couple of reasons. One is timing, and I'm going to talk about the refunding first, and then we'll talk about timing second, because some of it is implications that have come out in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was released late last week as part of the GOP plans for federal tax cuts. So with that, we'll start with the refunding. As Laura, I think, mentioned to some of you, we could talk about this for an hour. We could talk about this for 10 minutes. So feel free to ask questions, or if you are all good to go, we'll move on. But please stop us at any time, because the whole point is to make sure that the refunding and the components of the refunding are familiar to you. Okay? Okay, so we're under the first tab, outstanding debt. So this is the debt, the district's current outstanding debt. You have Series 2007 refunding bonds, Series 2010 refunding bonds. So those bonds were issued to refund prior bonds. You have some 2010 qualified school construction bonds, that's what that QSCB is, and the BAB Build America bonds. You have a 2012 B bonds, and then refunding bonds that we did in 2016, and the new money bonds that we just did in the spring of this year. The proposed refunding is to redeem and replace the 2012 B bonds. Okay. Do you want me to talk about the reason for we're only looking at those particular bonds? Would that be helpful to you? Yes, okay. So the 2007 bonds are, if you flip to the next page, I think this will help you a little bit better. So we've now broken out each of your individual series of bonds issue by issue. The 2007 refunding bonds are non-callable. If you look below they're in the square boxes below. See how it says enhancement, non-call terms, non-callable? Does everyone see that section? Okay. When you issue a new bond issue, so for instance, the bonds that we issued in 2017 in the spring, we have what's called a 10-year par call at that time. Investors get the call protection. They get the protection to not have those bonds called away from them for 10 years. So when we issued the 2017 bonds, they have a call date of July 1, 2027. So they would get paid principal and interest, regularly scheduled principal and interest payments until July 1, 2027. That is too far out in the future to look at redeeming those bonds. It would be economically disadvantageous. So what we do is we look for bonds that have a nearer call date. So right now, with the current interest rate environment, we're looking at call dates of 2018, 2019, 2020, 21. So that's kind of a reason why we're looking at what we're looking at. The 2007 refunding bonds are not callable, so we wouldn't look to call those. The 2010 refunding bonds, they are callable, but not until 2020. You can only advance refund an issue one time. An advanced refunding is, the call date is more than 90 days away. A current refunding is within 90 days from the call date. So we can only call those 2010 bonds 90 days before July 1, 2020. So we can't look to do those at this time. You could with a taxable series, but that gets a little more complicated. The 2010 and 2010 bonds, the Qualified School Construction and the Build America bonds, have make-whole calls, which means you would have to pay the regularly scheduled principal and interest payments until the final maturity of those bonds, so it wouldn't make sense to refund those. The next is the 2012 bond issue that we're looking at. That has a call date of 2021. The next is the 2016 refunding bonds. Those are non-callable. The next is the 2017 issue that we just did in the spring, which, as I previously mentioned, has a call date of July 1, 2027. So for that reason, for the refunding, that's the only series of bonds we're looking to refund at this time. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
So,
Yeah, I think on the next one, on the next page. Okay. Do you want to go ahead?
yeah. So good afternoon. My name is Fong Pham. I'm Megan's colleague at RBC. I'll cover the information on page 7.
I was short.
She's a little shorter. So when she refers to a refunding, is everybody familiar what a refunding is? It's effectively a refinancing, just like you would refinance your mortgage. So as Megan mentioned, in the upper left-hand corner, it just contains bullet points of what we're achieving with this refunding. We're looking to take out or replace the 2012 bonds. The maturities that we're looking at for refunding is the 2022 to 2031 maturities. That amounts to about $51 million. For purposes of our analysis, we're structuring the refunding to basically save on an annual basis a level amount, an equal amount in each year. So moving to the upper right-hand corner, this is kind of summarizes the results of the refunding. As I mentioned, we're looking to refund the outstanding par amount of $51 million. We're replacing that with $46 million of refunding bonds that we're looking to do. And we won't get in all the details, but that difference has to do with the premium that we're expected to generate on the refunding issue. The savings on a gross basis in future dollars is roughly $4 million to the district. On a net present value, it saves about just under $3.3 million, equating to 6.43% of the amount of the bonds that the district's looking to refund. And I think it'll be a little more clear if we go down to the bottom right-hand corner, the debt service comparison. So this table here essentially lays out, compares what your existing debt services on those bonds that we're looking to refund. That's in the first column. That's your prior net debt service. And then we're comparing that with the refunding debt service. And that difference there is the amount of savings that in the future savings column, the sum of that is that $4 million that I mentioned. And for the first 4 years, because we're not refunding anything from 2018 to 2020, the savings that are reflected there is just the interest. And from 2022 to 2031, you can see the district saving approximately $400,000 a year for the sum of the $4 million. And then on a present value basis, that totals the 3.3 that I mentioned. Does that make sense? Okay.
Let me bring up one other point. Fong's going to talk about it right now, but one of the concepts in the upper right-hand corner, the negative arbitrage, that is $804,000 today. And we'll go through an analysis on the next page. There's also included in Appendix A a detailed set of numbers so we can explain what negative arbitrage is. But effectively, these bonds are not callable until July 1, 2020. What happened, 21, I apologize. What happens is you will fund an escrow account and you will pay your regularly scheduled principal and interest payments out of that escrow account until the call date of 2021. Those monies that are deposited into an escrow account are invested in treasuries, securities, state and local government, security slugs, things like that. They are earning less than what the bond yield will be on the bond, so that is that component, the difference is what we call negative arbitrage. The closer you get to the call date, the lower that negative arbitrage amount would be. However, if interest rates were to rise, your savings would obviously go down. If interest rates were to go down, your savings would go up. So that's the concept there. Again, we can go through a detailed set of numbers if that's helpful, but there's details around that negative arbitrage under Appendix A where there's a final set of numbers. And then let's go to this page. Here we go. Okay.
So,
Board Member Kirby? Yeah, is it okay if we?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So you said that we would fund an escrow account. What do we use to fund the escrow account?
The proceeds from the sale of the bonds.
Thank you.
Yep.
And
Board Member Hartman?
so is the 3.2 million, is it actually net of the negative arbitrage, or?
It's net, no, it's net of the cost associated with issuing the refunding. Basically, if the escrow account was achieving the exact same interest rate as the rate the bonds were issued at, you would not have negative arbitrage.
so in effect, your savings, if there was no negative arbitrage, your savings would be like $4 million. But because that drag on the escrow reduces the savings.
Okay.
And so on page 6, or on page 8, sorry, you know, for all of our refunding analysis, you know, one of the things we do is look at what each of the maturities save on a net present value, which means to reflect of all the costs, and as well as take a look at the negative arbitrage efficiency to make, you know, to help us determine whether that particular maturity is efficient to include in the refunding. And so in this table here, you can see the outstanding bonds and the coupons and the par amount, the call date of the 2012B bonds. The next column shows by maturity the individual savings for each of those maturities. So for instance, if you take a look at 2031 maturity, by refunding that particular maturity, the district's saving $223,000, or otherwise, you know, roughly 2.3% of the par that's outstanding. The negative arbitrage, as Megan mentioned, what we do in the industry, it's, you know, there are benchmarks, you know, typically for when we look at present value savings of maturities, the benchmark is around 3%, so anything above 3% would make sense to include. But on the other side too, we also look at whether the negative arbitrage is above 50%, which is deemed, you know, the benchmark for that measurement, and the efficiency for each of the maturities is outlined there, and as you can see, the majority of those exceed, you know, 50%. And that's basically just the sum. So, and how we get to that calculation is just not to get too far in the weeds, but it's just the sum of the present value savings and the negative arbitrage, the sum of two, and it's the ratio of the PV savings to that total to get you to the 59%. So any maturity that we look at that is above, too much, probably.
No, it was good. These folks, it was just a sidebar. My
Yeah.
person to my right
So-
totally gets finances. I
Right.
have confessed that I was an English teacher, but I appreciate this.
Yeah, so, the bottom line, anything above 3% on PV and 50% on arbitrage, you would look at or consider to include in the refunding.
So does that mean, from what you've said, that you would not then refund the first and the third on that because you're below the 50%?
Yes, and that's, well,
And do you have that choice?
you
or-
have that choice, and because if we were to leave it out, and this comes back to the tax reform that Megan will go over, the net between those three, basically, it doesn't cost the district anything to refund those. And so to leave them out for a future refunding is probably, there could be a possibility in the future that it'd be done, but it'd be less likely. And so just to clean everything up, our analysis included everything.
And the way that we've written, sorry, I don't know if you can hear me, but the way we've written the resolution or had the attorneys draft the resolution is to include everything, so that if the time comes and we get to market, then if you strip out maturities, you have that flexibility, but to give you as much flexibility going into the market as possible. Go ahead.
So what happens if you didn't refund?
All right.
What happens if you didn't refund?
They would just remain outstanding, and you would pay the originally scheduled principal and interest payments on them.
So the refunding is really dependent upon the coupon rate also then, of what you're
It's a
going to be
function of
paying?
the coupon and the yield. So there's yields on bonds as well. Do you want us to get into that?
Are you getting into it later on? Is
I
that the
can,
next?
we can walk through an example in the appendix if that's what
Okay,
you'd like
yeah,
to do.
I would, because from what I just read a little bit, it's very dependent upon those two, and therefore they would make sense or they don't make financial sense.
Right. Let's go to the next page, and then maybe we can skip to the set of numbers, walk you through those, and then we can go back to the other items that we have contained in the presentation. In working through this analysis, and working with the CFO at the district, she thought this would be helpful for you to see what does this $3.2 million do for your taxpayers. And so what we laid out here is your existing Series 2012B bond, I'm sorry. Okay. Your existing 2012B debt service and how it's structured, your principal and interest payments on that particular set of bonds, less the debt service that we would retire, plus the new bonds that would be issued. So as Fong previously mentioned, we would retire $51 million worth of bonds. We would issue $46 million worth of new bonds. The estimated new debt service is in that column right here to the right of that, which shows your future value savings. What we then did is compare it to your assessed value, because that's the base for which you calculate your taxes off of. You have such a large tax base, you can see what that does in terms of pennies, but it's still a savings to the district taxpayers. We don't know what your rate is next year, or sorry, what your assessed value will be next year, so we just assumed a 1.5% growth rate, which is very conservative compared to what your growth rate has been in the past. So that kind of will show you what the taxes will do.
Board Member Kirby, so what has our growth rate been in the past on assessed value, approximately?
This past year was in excess of 6.
And is it, do you remember what the trajectory has been on that assessed value growth rate? Was that just a one-year bump, or has it been climbing?
So in 2015, what I would tell you is tax rate calculation changed from what is what used to be a full cash value to now a limited property value. Full cash value used to be called secondary, and you would, in some years, you saw 20-30% growth. You still have a secondary or full cash value, a rate, or assessed value. Off the top of my head, I don't have that, I have that number with me, but to calculate your taxes, on the limited property value, it ranges from 3 to 7%.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Did you have something else? Okay. All right, maybe next it would be helpful to walk through Appendix A. We won't, there's a lot of detail here. We won't walk through every page, but we'll kind of high level unless you want to get into, you have questions. So the sources and uses is the first page. The sources and uses will tie to each other. So whatever amount you generate as a source of bonds, you'll have the equal amount on the uses side. Here you'll see the par amount is $46,730,000 that we would raise. There's an additional $8,915,000 of premium. To answer your question, Allison, we'll do that on the next page, okay? Then there will be a transfer from prior bond fund, so you have monies already held at the county treasurer set aside to pay this debt service amount on July 1, 2017. January 1, 2018. That would just be a transfer internally from their account for the benefit of this refunding. On the uses side, the open market purchase, that's the deposit to the escrow that we referred to. So you'll have to set aside enough principal to pay off those bonds, which was the $51,025,000, plus the difference is the interest component associated with the bonds until the call date of 2021. Okay. Then there's delivery date expenses, which are the cost of, your underwriter, the cost of your rating agency, preparing the offering document. Those are the costs associated with that. Then there's just the additional proceeds, which is the rounding so that they total. The rate and yield here on the next page, and sorry, this is a little bit small, but the interest rate is the coupon rate. The yield is the rate at which we receive in the market, okay? So municipal bonds are priced off of what is called the Municipal Market Index, MMD, Municipal Market Data Index. It's a daily index that comes out, and Scottsdale's bonds, any issuer's bonds, are spread to that index. So this is, when we ran these numbers, this is where we would, in today's environment, believe that your yields would be. The difference between the rate and the yield generates a price. You'll see because yields are so low, it's creating a dollar price that's in excess of par, in excess of 100. If the yield, for instance, in the 2022 maturity was 3.5, that price would be 100. If the yield was in excess of 3.5, that price would be under 100, okay? So you can see we're generating a lot of premium. That $8,915,000 is a benefit to the district. It's what investors are willing to give you at the time we go to market. You get the $8,915,000 and that gets deposited into your account. They give you that for receiving on the latter end the 5% coupons in the later years, okay? If you go to the next page. Go ahead.
And the district is,
Sorry.
and the district is not required to keep that premium to pay off at any point. They can just use those funds
Correct.
in today's
Correct.
environment, just because we know that we're collecting taxes for the 5% that we're actually paying at the end of the period.
The premium is a benefit to you. So what happens is you're refunding $51 million of bonds. The premium is going to reduce the par amount of bonds that you're issuing. So now you're only issuing $46 million of bonds, so you're paying interest on a lower par amount.
Is that typical for all districts?
Yes.
And that's what happened when we sold these bonds. There was a premium.
Yes.
So we got those additional
Which is
funds.
exactly correct. So you sold
And-
$39 million of bonds. So a refunding is a little bit different than a new money. On the refunding, it helps you is in the fact that it reduces your the cost of your escrow. On a new money, what it did is you sold $39 million worth of bonds. You got proceeds of 45, so you have $45 million worth of projects that you could pay for within the district. That's the premium component.
Someone still pays that difference though over time. It's not like all of a sudden you get this free money, correct? So it just so happens since we're not generating the revenues to pay that over time, we get that from our taxpayer?
What
How does
happens
that
is, so if you were to, let's say, okay, so on the 2031 maturity, an investor is getting a 5%, right? So you're paying them 5% interest rate, the district is paying a 5% interest rate on those bonds. If that was 4%, then you would less premium, you would receive less premium, and the par amount of your bonds would be more. So they're wanting that return, that 5% return. You're getting the benefit on the front side for the premium amount. But over time, you have a 5% coupon, correct? But that premium is supposed to help equalize that so that it's a current market rate. Okay? Is that good? The next page is your bond summary statistics. So the arbitrage yield you'll see is 2.3. This concept, the all-in tick right here, you'll see, so see how the average coupon is 4.75 here? That's the blend or the average of all those coupon rates that you see on the prior page, which range from 3.5% to 5%. But your all-in borrowing cost is that 2.68. That's the benefit of the premium.
So in the past, Arizona, and this legislation changed a couple years ago, the premium was limited to, it was.
5%.
Yeah, most recently 5%. But because investors demanded a higher coupon, there was a yield penalty to a lot of school districts in Arizona that, in many ways, cost them a significant amount more money because they couldn't issue, those high coupon bonds that the investor wanted. And so in order to meet that premium limitation, you had to lower the coupons, but in doing so,
Raise the
the investor wanted more yield, which was a penalty to the districts, well, to any issuer borrowing jewel bonds. But with that legislative change, allows the higher coupons and more effective pricing in the market to bring down the borrowing costs.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Board Member Becker.
So what is the risk to the district? Where does the risk lie? If the coupon's set and you already are getting your funding, this additional premium up front, this is making it sound like there's no risk.
There's interest rate risk. So as I mentioned, the call date is not till 2021. And so if rates in the future were to be lower than they are right now, and you issued the bonds right now, you would be losing that extra savings potential that because you've already refunded the bonds. That's inherently the
And
risk.
because you can't refund them twice, is what you're saying.
You can't advance refund them twice. So in 5 years from now, if we've refunded these bonds now, and in 5 years from now, these bonds, they're lower interest rates, you couldn't advance refund those bonds then. All of the market commentary is when the Fed meets in December, there's gonna be a planned quarter basis point, quarter of a percent interest rate adjustment. The expectation is that will happen at least 2 more times in 2018. So, we're always subject to interest rate risk, but that inherently is what the interest rate risk, what is the risk or the con on a refund?
It sounds like the risk is only in refinancing because you've already done them. So you can keep what you have and just not do any refinancing or refunding.
Right.
as district.
Yep.
So what you're saying is there's really no risk in realizing this
The savings right now.
3.2, present value savings.
Well, you would just give up the opportunity to realize $3.2 million of savings if you don't do the refunding now.
But if you do the refunding, there's no risk that that is going to end up being a negative $3 million at some point.
No.
Or
I mean,
even
there-
a negative $1 million at some
Yeah,
point.
that brings up a point. So if you can go back, just because we're talking about it, if you go back to page, what's the chart?
We're looking at that. We'll just note for the record that Board Member Kravitz has joined us at
Thank you.
3:45. Welcome. Thank you.
Special.
That is a risk.
Okay, we're going back to section 1, page 7. So right in the lower right, left-hand quadrant, you have the bar graph lines are current market. So this shows you the level of savings by maturity in each year. If the market were to move 10 basis points, so 0.10%, your savings would drop to that blue line. If it would increase 30 basis points, your savings would drop to the yellow line. Below there, you'll see what that will do in terms of the dollars. Okay. So with that, let's go to, and we can come back to this point, the Jobs Cuts and Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is under Section 3.
Okay.
So initially in discussing this refunding, we've known, it has been out here for a while. We've been talking to the district. The plan was to try to approach the board about doing this at the time you did your next sale of bonds, whether that was going to be this fall or winter or in the spring. There were 4 things that came out as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act last Thursday when it was released that affect municipal bonds. These 4 are, I mean, obviously it affects every sector and everything, but these 4 affect municipal bonds only. The first was termination of private activity bonds. So that is, private housing, airports, healthcare, private higher education, things like that. Basically, what they're saying is you will lose the ability to issue tax-exempt bonds for those purposes effective January 1, 2018. Okay? The second was repeal of advance refunding. That's exactly what we're talking about here. So if this bond issue, if the district wants to move forward with this potential bond issue, the way that the bill is currently, or the way it's currently written, you will only be able to do so between now and December 31st. If you do not do so, then you would only, and this remains in and passes through the House and the Senate, you will only be able to issue advance refunding bonds, which is you'd only be able to refund the bonds 90 days before that call date of July 1, 2021. We don't know what interest rates are going to do. We've run a sensitivity analysis that basically says you would break even between if you did the issue now and versus wait until your 90 days before that call date, and rates would only have to go up 43 basis points between now, 2017, and April of 2021.
Board Member Hartman? So just because we have an expert here, and it's kind of interesting, what is the motivation behind that? What will be the impact? I mean,
It produces savings or generates savings on the a tax advantage side for the Fed. So
Are you talking about the motivation?
why they do
behind-
this?
So.
yeah,
so-
3602
right,
specifically, because it's this is municipalities too, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just wondering why.
So, when they look at doing tax cuts, they, it's gotta be revenue neutral, and so they've gotta,
Use your
they're-
signs.
they're reducing on the one hand, but they gotta raise taxes on the other, so
Got it.
this is their way of
So
doing
right
it.
now, if it's a tax exempt bond, that's a deduction for an investor that buys those bonds, that no longer would be a deduction for them.
Oh,
Good luck, new bean, okay.
Okay. The third and fourth don't have any impact on the district. Repeal of tax credit bonds and tax you will no longer be able to issue tax exempt bonds for professional sports stadiums. So, that is why we have, that is why we have the advanced refunding before you now. I don't know if anybody has additional questions. Go ahead.
Board Member Rebecca? I know, I'm trying to stay.
So the pro is obviously the savings. What's the con? Are there any?
Again, if you wait and this goes through, you will not be able to refund the bonds until 2021. If interest rates have gone up 100 basis points between now and then, your savings could be $1 million.
But if this goes through, no one's going to be able to do advanced refunding
No one.
on anything.
Nothing.
Right, so that investment goes away.
It just goes away.
It goes away. So this is really, if that becomes law, this is a one-time shot that we have, and that's what we're making a decision on. And the downside is if interest rates go through the roof, we do lose the savings we thought we were going to save.
Correct.
Yeah.
And at some point, can it go into the negative?
The savings?
Or is it so that there's really
So
no
in the
risk in
resolution
us
that will be-
losing money by doing this refunding?
In the resolution that will be in front of you, what we've built into it, and we can take direction if there's direction differently that you'd want to have, is that we would not move forward with the refunding if it did not achieve at least 3% present value savings. Okay, so we've built that threshold in there. The 3% present value savings on page 7, you'll see, on page 7, if you look at the plus 30 basis points, it's 1.9 million. You're getting closer to 3%, so it might be 40, 50 basis points. But we've built that minimum threshold in there that we would not be able to sell these bonds if we were not achieving at least 3% savings. If you want something in excess of that, we can build in that flexibility.
It's going to take me a while to take all this in, just so you know.
Okay, all right.
So that
So
would
then
be.
so we're
yes.
hearing today, obviously, that an action item is being drafted for Tuesday. I think one of the questions will be if we want to bring that back as an actual action item versus consent. I'm kind of getting a sense that we would want to leave that an action item, have the ability to discuss it that night. Sure. Additional questions? Okay. All right. All right. Just confirm.
And if
Okay.
you need any one-on-ones, we can arrange that, because this stuff is, this first time through it is
Yeah,
difficult.
I mean, we do this
Sure.
all day, every day, so it seems, it seems like it's common sense to us,
Lucky
but
you.
understand-
Wow. I didn't think so. That's
Yeah, I don't, that says a lot about us, right?
Right. All right, well then we'll move on to the second part of this fund. Information discussion item 3B, refinancing outstanding bonds of the district. Discussion with representatives of RBC Capital Markets LLC, the district's financial advisor regarding the possible refinancing of outstanding bonds of the district.
We kind of tagged them together.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, we did?
We did.
Well,
See,
that
I
was
I was told there were
refinancing.
really two
We
separate
were just going to do it again for
There's
Sandy.
another, yeah, the first one,
did
you
read-
talked
The
about
first one, I think the first one
refinancing.
was the new money, and we talked
Okay.
about that first.
Right.
Okay.
They
so it
did, they did
I
slide
thought
that
that might
in.
happen, and you said it'd be
And
two
I
different
said, oh,
things.
no,
All
we'll do
right.
that separate. We are making two different resolutions
Okay.
when it comes to the board
Okay.
next week. So you could talk about the demand that Scottsdale bonds bring, once again, just
Yeah.
to keep
So
everyone
what we are
straight.
putting in front of you is also the resolution to do the new money piece. Ideally, we'd like to sell the new money bonds and the refunding bonds at the same time because there's costs associated, savings associated with doing that. You don't have to pay 2 rating fees and there's fees, savings. So we're working expeditiously to try to do that. So that's what the second sale of bonds is for. If they're not ready, what they have said in the resolution is that we've designated it a Series 2017B, but that if it falls in a calendar year, we could issue them separately in 2018 and not have to come back to the board. There's a time limit, so if we waited more than 6 months, we'd have to come back to the board and ask for approval at that time.
Okay. Yes, Board Member Beckham.
How much are we looking at issuing?
Between
was that
45
said?
and 50 million.
Did I miss that?
No, you did not.
Okay.
I failed to mention that.
Thank you. for
Thank
these.
you.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you.
much. All right, we will move on then to information discussion item 3C, discussion on results-based funding.
We have Dr. Nance leading that discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Nance.
Good evening. I will start this, and then I'm going to ask Ms. Ibarra to come up and join me in just a few minutes so she can talk a little bit more about the specifics. Let me get to the beginning here. So you may have seen in the newspapers and heard that the state legislature and the governor have put together a plan to reward schools across the district for performance. And I need to kind of talk a little bit about the formula. We love the idea. It was so nice of them to do that. The formula was a little bit different, and so let me talk about that. First of all, they divided the schools in the state into two categories. You have schools that have fewer than 60% of the students on free and reduced lunch or in poverty. And then the second category is the schools that had 60% or more of the students enrolled in free and reduced lunch at that campus. And so they totally separated those two groups of schools. The data they use is from 2 years ago. And so it's not current data, it's from 2 years ago. And the data they used was strictly proficiency rates. There was no growth calculated into that. It was strictly proficiency rates. So what does that do? It causes a few issues. I've had many conversations with colleagues from other districts. In fact, I've been at 2 meetings where we specifically have talked about this and the implications of it. First of all, let me talk about the first category. If you've read the press on this, you've seen that there has been some criticism about the schools across the state that receive this funding. Those are very much typically low poverty schools. The scores that were used were percentage of students at performing and highly performing. And when you look at who those schools are, by far and large, they are schools with very, very low poverty rates. And so you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt when you look at how the money was awarded to that group. The other part of that, which is important, is that they use the range from 0 to 60% when they calculated those schools. That's a lot of schools in the state. The problem with that is that schools that are between 30 and 60% poverty rate have very close to a 0% chance of ever falling in the rewarded schools category. It is a function of poverty, and the statistics and the schools that were awarded do bear that out. And so we have schools in our district that are below 60% poverty. They're still Title I schools. They're still schools that may be above 30%. And the discussion I've had with other districts is that schools that fall into that category are virtually eliminated from this calculation. They don't have the opportunity to earn this money. The second category, those are schools with 60% or more students living in poverty or a free and reduced lunch. And so that's a little different story because you're talking about a very, very different group of schools. And we have a few schools that are in that category as well. Again, it's based on the spring 2016 scores, so that's 2 school years ago. And again, it's the same percentage, the top 10% of the passing rates in the state were those schools that were awarded. So there's some tricky pieces to this. Laura keeps reminding me that we haven't received all the money yet. We've received part of the money, and will we end up getting all of it? Well, we hope so, but we haven't yet. We've gotten the first part of the money, and so that's a consideration that we've got to keep in mind as time goes on as well. The other question is, will we ever see this again after this year? We don't know that. There was no commitment beyond this year at this point, and so you kind of have to be a little bit careful with what you do with it. So that's how you got the money in the first place. And then the state put out some criteria as to how districts may use these dollars that came into the school district. And I'm not going to read through all of this right here, but it talks about 2 things. It talks about using the dollars at those schools, and it talks about using the dollars across the district. And as I've talked to other districts, primarily in the East Valley, every district I've talked to is doing a split of those funds between district-wide efforts to improve instruction and school-based efforts to improve instruction. And if you look at the last, be the second to the last bullet on there, mentoring other schools and school leaders to replicate the model, or to provide other types of school improvement supports. And so they do leave open the opportunity to use funds for instructional improvement across all schools in the district. So let me talk a little bit about what other districts are doing with their dollars. And I made myself a list here. I can tell you that we have districts in the East Valley that are adding days to the teacher calendar for all teachers in the district. And those will be PD days, probably in the summer. I don't know when that would be, but more than likely in the summer. So they're adding work days for all teachers in the district to provide professional development, and then paying teachers to be there on those days. There is a district in the East Valley that is adding gifted staff, additional gifted teachers across the district with these dollars. There's a district in the valley that has a traditional school, and they're using the dollars to start another traditional school in their district because it's been so popular. Sounds familiar here. Many districts are bringing groups of schools together for professional development activities. There is a district in the East Valley that is using the dollars to pay for technology coaches across the district. There is a district in the valley talking about purchasing a STEM bus, a bus that would go around from school to school and work with students with STEM. Very unique idea there. A number of districts are looking at summer training for teachers across the district. And in most of these cases that I'm aware of, there's a split between the dollars that they're using for district-wide projects and district-wide PD and improvement, and dollars that are allowed for schools to develop their own individual plans. And so that's what I want to talk a little bit about. We received a little over $1.6 million. Well, we were told we're receiving a little over $6.6 million, Laura. I want to make sure I get that right. We have part of it so far. And so the discussion started about a month ago. We had, I think, all but 2 of our principals at a national conference, which happens to be here in Phoenix, so it was very nice that we had this locally and could go to it. It was on standards, grading, and assessment. And I had conversations with pretty much all of the principals that were at that conference, and they were so excited about this and about the topics that were being discussed and about the presenters that were there. They asked me each day of the 3 days we were there, how do we get these presenters in front of our teachers? How do we bring these folks to Scottsdale to have our own conference on standards, assessment, and grading? There's also been discussion about improving differentiation across this district, and how do we bring presenters and experts in the area of differentiation to put in front of our teachers. So that was kind of the emphasis to start this plan. The chart you can see there is broken up into sections. What we're looking at is a total of about 8% for training expenses. And that plan looks like it would be 5 days in the summer. We're looking at 3 right after school is out, 2 before school starts in the fall, and giving teachers across the district the opportunity to come and attend what would be our own conference and actually get paid for being there. We would pay the teachers to attend those conferences. And so certainly it would be optional. It's summertime. We're not going to tell people they have to be there. But we would like to be able to do that. That's what the 27% teacher stipends is. Those are dollars that would go directly back in the pockets of teachers for participating in that professional development. A little small amount, the 3% that says PD online, that is an online PD, and there are several companies out there that do that. But what they do is they provide hundreds of video clips of the experts talking about PLCs and rigor and first best instruction and the same things we've been discussing, some of the same presenters the principals have seen at the conferences that they're very interested in having. And so that comes out to about $1,500 per school for a district-wide subscription to that. So that would allow all of our schools to use those materials in staff meetings and campus-based training throughout the year. The 62%, the largest amount on there, would be something that principals would work with Ms. Ibarra to develop a plan for the school. Now, the only thing we have to ask is that they go back to the criteria that the state provided us and follow that criteria as they develop their own plans. And so that is in the process right now of the principals working with Ms. Ibarra and putting those plans together. That's what we've talked about in terms of how these funds can best be used to meet the needs of this district. Lots of dollars in the pockets of teachers, an opportunity to provide some of the best training that we could possibly bring to this district, some basic online PD that principals can use at their sites, and then a large amount for schools to develop their plans. And so with that, I'm going to ask Ms. Ibarra to come up here and talk a little bit about how those plans are being developed and how the principals are working with her.
Thank you, Dr. Nance. Good evening, President Proberg, Dr. Birdwell, board members. Basically what it is every school has been given their allocation, their allotment, and they've been asked to create a plan, not by themselves, but with their school committee, and then they are going to present it. They're not presenting it just to me. They are going to give it to myself, Dr. Nance, and to Laura Smith, and the three of us are going to sit down. And the only thing we're going to do is go off of the guidelines that the state has given us. We want to make sure that we're not doing anything that the state is telling us we can't do. So we're just going to go off of those guidelines. The minute it approves everything is good to go, I turn around and Ms. Smith just gives them that money and they get to spend it. So I've met with 2 principals so far. We've sat down and we've talked about how to actually go about this. Their concern was, it looks like we can't buy programs. It looks like we can't do this. It looks like, and I said, let's look at this. Let's look at the guidelines. Let's look at how you're wording it. And if you word it correctly, then yes, you will be able to expand on what you're doing at your school already. It will be an extension, because that's actually one of the allotments where they allow you to go on and increase what you're doing on your campus already. None of them have turned in a plan yet. I did not give them a deadline, because when you're given some money, it's kind of, let's go back and really look at that and let's make sure that we're using it in a positive way, a way that we can use the best for what we have. Another thing that we wanted to let you know is we found out that it can roll over, and so that's a really nice thing. If you don't spend it all, it will roll over so they can use it for next year too. So the principals are aware of that, and that's really a good thing. Do you have any questions?
I want some clarity on something, but I want to see if Laura can answer it, and it's because my mind has forgotten it, so help me out here a little bit. But what percentage have we been paid to date?
They should have released
You were counting,
60%.
there you go. Hey, somebody else got ahead of you on that one. How is that actually paid? Because in Scottsdale, when we receive increases, it's really increasing the taxes of the Scottsdale community. This isn't something where
This
they.
is state money.
So this is state money. So this actually is.
It's like a grant.
Right. Now, one last piece of information. It's one-time money. Now, we have talked with individuals who are working with the legislature and the governor's office. The governor's intention, not done, I'm just going to intention. What we've heard is there is the desire to do the 1.06 increase next year and continue to fund results-based, but that's intention. There's no budget that's been done, but that is the discussion at this point. So there's no guarantee reoccurring. This is based on 2015, so this was the first year of AZ merit data, is that right, Dr. McCauley? The first year we gave AZ merit was 2015?
No.
Was it second year?
Yes.
It was the first year. So first year we gave the test, and this is what the data was based on.
No, the 16 would have been the second year.
Second
It was-
year.
Second year, okay, so I just needed the clarity in my head, because the first year, we know that the data from AZ Merit had a lot of faults in it as well. Second year, the state was better at that distribution of the tests. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on the data they used.
Yeah. One of the things we have caution principles about is buying positions, creating new positions of people at their school, because it's one-time money. If a school decides to create a specific position for someone at the school or a specialist of some kind, they need to know it's for 1 year, and then it may go away. And so that's something we think they should know up front.
Board Member Kirby.
So thanks for the presentation. On the teacher stipends for the PD, the 5 days, and you said that those days were optional? Optional attendance, correct?
Correct.
So does the stipend flex based upon who attends, or do we have a district set stipend for PD?
We have a set stipend. We've set that stipend. It's in
Okay.
practice
So-
right now.
So the 27% red on the chart, what participation rate does that assume?
So what that allows for are many, many teachers. Will they all come? I don't know.
Well,
That's something.
Can you
Yeah, I
define
can
many,
give you
like
numbers.
80% or 100%?
No, the plans that we put into place, those dollars would cover 500 teachers at the 3-day conference and 200 teachers at the 2-day conference. And again, what you would want to do is if you didn't get 500 at the first one, you could expand the participation in the second one. So if that helps, that's what we calculated those dollars on. The reason I got those numbers is because in my conversation with principals, I kept asking, how many do you think would come? How many do you think would come? And most of them said, around 40% maybe.
Okay, so it's not just a come one day, the day after?
No,
It's a 3-day block commitment and a 2-day block commitment?
We would expect that, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's it for now.
Dr. Sitton, what's the stipend for, the dollar amount stipend that we use currently?
Hope we got this right. We've based it on $25
$25 an hour, yeah.
$25 an hour. Correct.
And just to be clear, there's no limitations as far as the teachers participating in this PD. It's not like they can only come from the schools who receive
Oh, no,
this.
no,
It's
no, no. The
across our
whole
district.
intent was to
They
open this
can-
up across the district.
And provide
Absolutely.
PD across the
And
district.
that,
That's the intent.
that amount does include the associated benefits that you'd have to pay along with the hourly rate.
Good job.
Thank you. Board Member Hartman.
Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Nance and Mr. Rivera, Dr. Rivera. What was the process to kind of even get to this? Like, what kind of input? How, is this just?
This really started at the conference where the principals were there and just were so excited about what was going on and coming to me and coming to Mrs. Redner and Ms. Ibarra, Dr. Johnson, and saying, how can we get these presenters in front of our teachers? And so we really don't have another funding source that we could use across the district. And so the discussion started about dollars that we anticipate coming in from results-based funding, the fact that those dollars are available to be used to improve instruction across the district in addition to the schools. And so that's where it started. And it was kind of a quick thing. They came to me and said, these are the best presenters on these topics, and we made a list together as to who they were. Who would you really like to get here? And so I made the contact just to see if these folks were available. And we're talking about the week of Memorial Day we're looking at for this first conference. Every single one that we were interested in is available that week. Now, they weren't available the week before, and they're not available the week after, but they were available that week. And these are folks that come from other places in the country and spend their time with us. So that part's exciting, and I haven't finalized anything yet, but we're kind of hoping to do that fairly soon so we don't lose them.
Dr. Nance, you noted that 2 principals were not at that conference with you. Was there an opportunity at a principals meeting, Ms. Ibarra, that those principals got looped into the conversations with their colleagues?
Oh, yeah, that was discussed at the principal meeting following that conference, absolutely.
Remember Hartman?
So just a clarifying question. So when the request came for this training, was it just in response to, seeing these amazing presenters? Or was it in response to, hey, we have this result-based funding, what can we do with it? Let's do this. Or, do you see what I'm saying?
Well,
What drove the
The conversation, I mean, we have 17 schools that did not get results-based funding. So the discussion was more about, this is an amazing opportunity to bring experts in front of teachers to talk about something we really need to do. That's where it came from.
Go ahead, Board Member Beckham.
Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to say that I think that, first of all, talking with your principals to find out was a great idea, to collaborate with them to how to use this funds.
They came to me. I didn't even
That's even better. Well, I appreciate then having an open mind, that you were receptive to that. But secondly, that we're investing back in our teachers. And I think that that is so exciting. And I heard this morning at Coronado that one of the areas is there's never enough time.
Oh.
And to think that you could have 3 days when they're not in school, or 2 days, and then spend some of that time reflecting on what they learned the prior 2 days or 2.5 days, can really just benefit them as professionals, benefit the teachers as professionals. So I just want to thank you. And
Absolutely.
I'm in full
One of the
support
things that we
of
would
it.
be very interested in doing is, during each of the days that we would be bringing teachers together, we would like to end the day with those teachers spending time with their principal and talking about, what did we hear today? What could we do at our school to make some great things happen? And have that dialogue just kind of to wrap up each day for a few minutes. So that would be part of what we would like to do.
Thank you. I'd just love to piggyback off that a little bit, I love the idea that when this board and administration has tasked our principals with becoming those true academic leaders that we know our sites need. And here, we're finally, being able to invest money, because we usually have to say, sorry, there's no money for this, for professional development, to actually take these dollars. We recognize they might not be here next year, but to support our principals and our teachers in that professional development that we know they're craving. Our principals have said it, our teachers have said it as well. To really earmark this percentage as much as we can and make it as productive as we can, I think supports exactly, what we've asked our principals to do, and our sites to do as well. So I just wanted to kind of throw in my support of that idea as well. Board Member Kirby.
Okay, so I also would like to echo the sentiments of allowing the sites to have input into what they need, because we all know all of our sites have different needs because they serve different communities. So gushing with thank you for allowing that process to happen. I have some questions about the site decision-making process. You said that principals are developing plans with their school committees.
Correct.
Are those site councils? Or who's on those committees?
We've left that up to the
left it to
schools.
them.
We haven't told the principals that has to be.
Okay, because there's all kinds of different constituents to our district and then therefore our schools. There are parents who have one set of belief of how this money should be spent. We have our teachers who have another sets of belief of how this money should be spent, et cetera, et cetera. Are we asking our principals to solicit input from all of those constituent groups? Or just the teachers? Is there been any guidance given on that, at least?
Honestly, I haven't given a lot of guidance. It was, here's your funds, come up with the plan. I gave them the guidelines, and I said, when you're reviewing the guidelines, like the two principals that I have sat down with, they said, I'm really struggling with this, because a lot of it stated that it had to be used for PD.
Right.
And so they're saying we're having this great opportunity, but I'd like to take some of my teachers to this national conference. Would that fit in? Absolutely, it would fit in. And so they're going back and they're talking to their teachers, because the guidelines are very much based on what's needed at the school. Is it professional development? Is it, I apologize, I'm looking down. Is it increasing a program we're already doing? So it's what's going on at the school site, and the best people that would know that would be the teachers and would be the principal.
So if I can continue. So the first line on how we're supposed to spend this says, it's must. The majority of the monies must be used for teacher salaries, which, because it's one-time money, we're not putting any of this towards permanent salary increases, correct? Because it's one-time money. I didn't hear at the district level, like other districts are doing, that we're hiring any teachers, gifted teachers, anything like that. But what I did hear you say is that a site, if they are clearly understanding it's one time, they could bring on somebody for a year.
Certainly.
Or for whatever they choose to spend their money
As long as they
against.
didn't supplant.
That's correct.
And that's the critical piece. So you can't use the dollar to replace something you already have.
Right. You can't just change the funding source from a current person to this.
Okay. The question that has come up repeatedly is, and it's not teacher salaries, but it's teacher one-time stipends, bonuses. Is there any, yes, you can do that, no, you can't do that? What is the district guidance on that?
We have not given principals guidelines on whether that would or would not be allowed. I just have to add a little piece to that, and this is coming from me, but I just feel like I need to share it with you. Like I said earlier, we have probably 6 schools in this district that, under this formula, will never qualify for similar dollars. And I just don't want to have to answer the question from a teacher at those schools, why do I want to teach here? I could go over there and maybe qualify for some money. And so I just want to be very careful about that part. And I think that's something, I'm sure principals are thinking about that. But to answer your question, we have not given them guidance one way or another on the idea of bonuses.
Dr. Nance, if I could ask a clarifying question on that, maybe Ms. Smith can help me with it. So Ms. Kirby, you made me think of the fact that, is this, if they chose to give a stipend, they certainly could choose to do that. But it would have to be the individuals who were in the school in 2015. It couldn't be if I have 5 new teachers this year, they would not qualify. Is that correct?
That would make sense.
You have to go back to 2015?
Well, technically, that's how they earned it, with those students in that class or that school under those teachers. So if they went to another school, that's the can of worms. I mean, the governor has given the districts the freedom to use this with these general guidelines. Now, they also said most is for salaries, is to hire new teacher, or to hire teachers and to provide for teacher professional development. That's what they said the majority of the money needs to be spent for.
Now, wait, correct me if I'm wrong, because they've been driving some clarity when they first sent it out, didn't have a lot of clarity to it, but it may not be used for administrative bonuses.
No.
or front office bonuses, or classified bonuses. Is that correct? So it would just be teachers?
If, that's an interesting question, because
I
if
think
you.
it said
if-
certified, and I just want to make sure, because
Somewhere.
with that, because here's the can of worms I typically run into when we start doing these is, I get the, well, does the counselor qualify, does the psychologist, does the OT, does the PT, does the nurse?
This
does-
says teachers. Now,
Teachers,
can
okay,
I-
so I just want to have clarity verbally as people log on and are listening to this, is that there are some restrictions to this of who in that building would qualify.
And I don't have that definition.
And so, one of the issues that sometimes gets arise is the fact that they say, well, if 5 of my teachers don't qualify, I get questions sometimes where somebody says, well, but Dr. Birdwell, can't you find M&O money to make sure that they get something? And that's not this case. This is not because when the 301 came out and counselors weren't falling into that, then we had huge issues and debates over whether counselors should get it. And if you pay counselors, it comes out of your 01, and Ms. Smith would look at me and say, are you kidding me?
The other piece to this that I've had conversations with other districts on is, what do you do with the teacher who was here in 2016 and now they work somewhere else?
That's right.
Do you go back and send them a check? And I've never heard anybody say yes to that, but what I have heard the discussion on is, if you're going to do a bonus type situation, you need to go back to 2016 in the spring when that test was given and find out who was there at that time, and they may be at a different school now, but if they're still in the district, they would still be part of that. So it's a little complicated.
First, Board Member Kravitz first, I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, Board Member Hartman then.
Question, so I appreciate the conversation, right? Because it is kind of a little bit tricky, because there's a lot, we want to do what's right at the end of the day. We want to reward those that have done well, that have met this criteria, but also benefit, as many kids and as many educators as possible. So I appreciate kind of the 62-38% split, however it worked out, right? But 38% is benefiting the whole district, every educator who chooses to participate in this training. So I think that's terrific. The 68%, that's going to be concentrated on 12 schools. So the easy math is it's about $84,000 a school. I mean, that's
Yeah, and the money, it's all based on enrollment, if you remember, and
Okay,
you
so
back the
it's driven
criteria.
based on
The
it,
schools
okay.
that were above 60% free and reduced got significantly more per
right.
student than the.
But it's one
ones-
school and.
Yeah.
Well,
Roughly.
and I think it's really critical to state, though, that there are some schools that only have $50,000 and others who have $450,000.
Okay, so that
So
was going to be.
that's significant.
There was a big difference between one and the
All right,
next.
so this underscores the comment I was going to make. As a board member, I would be really interested, I don't need to see all the detail, but I would be interested in seeing what those 12 site leaders chose to do with it.
Sure.
And then understand what they feel the return on that investment was. Because, should we be lucky enough to ever get this again, right, it would be interesting to know, what did we learn from this? Are there some things that we would want to do again? And are there some things that we're saying, let's not do this again?
Absolutely.
So I think that would be a really useful learning tool, growth mindset tool, for us to figure out,
Would it
how
be-
to do this.
Would it be the desire of the governing board that, that we bring those plans to the board to see before we officially approve them? Would that be the desire, or
From
no?
my perspective, I think it's your decision.
Okay.
I would just be interested in a summary of what
Oh,
you decided and.
That's a
what the
great
outcome
idea. We'll
was.
do that.
Okay,
Well,
thank
Absolutely.
you.
Board Member Kirby.
So to piggyback, I would be interested in what was decided and what the success metric is
That's what I'm saying.
today.
Yes.
Like, how will we know if we were successful with this investment? What are we going to look at?
And that
Is
could-
it, we're bringing in an intervention specialist for math, and so we're looking for our math scores to increase in fourth grade, or whatever? That's what I would be, and so that we can go back.
I love that idea, and that just kind of triggered in my mind. That should be probably part of the plan. If you're going to spend,
Yeah.
$25,000 on this, whatever it is, how are you going to measure whether it was worth it or not?
Right.
I love that.
I have to just add my, my agreement with that thought, because it was hard for me not to, look at this presentation and not think philosophically, what does this mean about our direction as a district? Results-based funding, lots of new ideas, lots of new theories and philosophies going into this idea. How is our district going to translate it? How are our educators going to translate it? These dollars are few and far between. How are we going to prioritize it and get the most bang for our buck with every single one of them? I think we really have to examine it. The thought that some of these dollars would just kind of go out and it's no real investment, they disappear. I think certainly that's the risk if you're looking at a bonus situation of it just goes out, it's gone, it's forgotten, but to really tie in stipends with training, and you're still putting dollars into teachers' pockets, but you're also getting back for themselves as professionals and for our sites, and most importantly, our students, you're getting benefits as well. I just can't think that can't be lost in these discussions, and then to see how we were able to translate these dollars into success in the future. I think those are really important. We have those conversations now. Board Member Kravitz.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So the 62%, which is the school plans, those are dollars that you don't have to work with another school.
Correct. You may, but you don't have to.
You may, but you don't have to.
Right.
So it was just mentioned that there's a big differential between what some schools may receive. Some could receive 50,000 and some could receive 400,000.
Actually,
Not that
Or
much.
whatever,
it's
you know.
91,000 is the low and 263,000 is the high.
Those are the original amounts.
Those are the total amount.
Okay, so depending on the number of teachers that are sharing the pot, it's possible that, for the math people in here, is it possible that just because you're at a school, I don't know, the school that got 263, I don't know how many teachers they have, but those teachers could conceivably be getting more if that whole bonus idea was talked about, or was contemplated. They could get more just because they happen to be at that school, even though a school getting less money at another end of the spectrum, they could have done as well, but however this formula works, they could get less money through no fault of their own.
It was based on enrollment, dollars per student.
So it's enrollment, but, so it's not, each teacher, you get $100 and you get, it may not be consistent. It just
Not
is
at the
the luck of
schools.
the draw of which school you're at.
And whatever plans developed at that school.
Is that, making sure I'm
It
understanding
it
that
is that,
correctly.
and I think that because in some schools where you, let's just say you have $263,000, the school that got the greatest funding, and you take away 33%, 86.7, you're basically balanced with $176,000.
63,000.
And so if you say there's a staff of 40, and you divided that out, you could potentially say, well, gosh, that's a $4,400 stipend.
Right.
And so when you look at that.
Or bonus, you
This
mean.
is, or bonus.
If you wanna
So it
clarify.
becomes a very passionate discussion because, let's be just quite honest, a $500 check to a teacher is a lot of money. And that I think is what the state is check at 1.06, I think is an average, is about a $500 check our teacher's going to get in December. And what a difference that makes. So when you talk about this, so when you say, well, a stipend, gosh, well, I get 3 extra days of a stipend, that's significant dollars too. But I had to do something for that.
Right.
Because we want to look at outcomes and how does it impact. So sitting down as a staff and saying, boy, we get to make a plan for $176,000, that is a significant decision. And I appreciate Ms. Ibarra not rushing that decision for the schools, because that's a lot of money that schools are not accustomed to having. You know, although, you know, I will say this, title schools do have title funds and other funds that they are accustomed to building plans for. So I just appreciate the fact that you guys, because I haven't been engaged in this, have moved this to a principal level with their staff. So it is a significant amount of money.
Board Member Kirby?
Okay, so while I heard on the one hand that we're allowing the principals flexibility on developing these plans, as long as they stay within the guidelines, I then heard all kind of negative conversation around teacher stipends. like, well, here's the downsides, it's this downside, this downside. Clearly, there are downsides.
Well, but can we distinguish between, because I'm hearing two different things, stipends that are
They're one
basically
time-
pay, well, but they're pay for training. Then there's
Okay, sorry.
bonuses for
I'm talking-
nothing.
I'm talking
I mean,
about a
not
bonus.
nothing.
Bonus.
See, our
Right.
teachers
Just
work hard,
a
but
bonus.
bonuses
Right.
that just come
Right.
and there's no
Right.
strings attached, there's no
Right.
training attached.
And so I clearly see the downsides, and I don't disagree with the downsides. But I also see the upside of $500, $300, $2,000 as a, what do we call it? Bonus. A one-time bonus being impactful for a teacher. I just want to, it's just important to me that we have our sites, we give our sites autonomy in that decision-making process.
Absolutely. We've not said you can't do bonuses.
So just for the record, clarity again, superintendent, cabinet are not going to tell people not to do that at all. If that site says, you know, we're going to do some training and we're going to do a combination and we're going to do a little bit of stipends, we are going to support that. I think the thing that we have to do is balance the dollars and when they come in. So remember that only 60% has come in. So they may say, well, we're going to do a stipend, but Ms. Smith may have to say, okay, but the stipend will have to come in June because we haven't received all the money from the state. So there would be that piece as well. But clearly, the cabinet is not going to prevent any principal or staff from creating that plan as long as they stay in the guidelines the state's given them. Correct? Okay.
Board Member Hartman, you had your hand up?
Just two things. So, and I think you'd address this, but whatever that amount was per school, it's now 62% of it.
Correct.
Okay. And then secondly, I just want to underscore that I too am very comfortable with whatever a site leader wants to do because I trust site leadership to do what's in the best interest of the most educators and the most students. And I think there may be some really innovative things that come out of this. Having said that, I just want to underscore, that's the reason why a summary report, right? That's shared with all of us, I think will be a really great process in understanding what the outcomes were for it. So that's great.
Yeah, well,
Board
can I-
Member
Go ahead.
Kravitz?
I just wanted to reiterate that we need to keep in mind, Dr. Nance, you said 6 schools in our district will never qualify
Well, the chances
based
of.
on the
Model.
Higher
current
poverty
model.
schools cannot compete with a school with 2% free and reduced rate.
Okay.
Can't.
Board Member Kirby?
Okay, so can we get a list of our schools and what those poverty rates are so that we
Yeah,
can see?
I have it
Okay,
right
and
there.
then, the second comment to piggyback on Board Member Hartman again is, when you do that summary list by school, I would like to see it by school, because if I see, I don't know, let me make up something really silly. I need a refrigerator in the teacher's lounge in every single school, then maybe we should be considering refrigerators in the teacher's lounge in every single school and fund it as the district. And that's an example that I'm
Sure.
being facetious. I don't really think we need, but I'd like to see that, because then maybe that'll help our budgeting decisions. Look, we have our best of our best schools are all asking for this consistently. Should we be evaluating that very carefully to invest in all of our schools?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I also want to say the outcomes piece is real critical, because if a decision is made and it's measurable, and next year another school gets that dollar, they're going to be able to tap that principal, that colleague, and say, did you get the success out of this math intervention that you thought you were going to get? So I just want to reiterate that when you communicate with the principals, would you please communicate we are going to provide a summary, and we're going to be looking for some of those outcomes, what their expectations, and they may not get them, but what are their expectations of it, so that we are able to share that with colleagues. Because if the governor is able to do this 2 years in a row or 3 years in a row, it would be great to build kind of a group of, here are some successes we found in practice. Because the intent of this is to create successful duplication of practice.
Right.
And we want to be able to identify that and be true to that. I would love for the governor's office to one day call Scottsdale and say, now, this money came, how did it affect, and what were the duplicated pieces that you were able to find, for us to be able to respond to that and say, well, here's where we tried this and then we didn't, but we did this, and then we were able to duplicate that later and expand it out to the rest of the district, and we found that it made a difference. So, again, thank you.
And I would love to add my strong agreement in Board Member Hartman's comments on, I think we have great trust that our site leadership and our principals, along with the assistance of our admin, will be very thoughtful with these dollars and consider what greatest impact they can make for their students. I have total confidence that our principals will do that. And again, be ready to take a look at, did it work? Was it successful? Was that impact there for our students and teachers? I have a lot of confidence in those conversations ahead for their plans.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions or comments? No? All right. Thank you. Okay, so we will move on to our next information discussion item, 3D, discussion on superintendent's evaluation policy and evaluation tool, including current governing board policy CBI, evaluation of superintendent and corresponding exhibit CBIE.
All right, Ms. Marshall's going to join us on this conversation.
Sure.
Devon, thank you for being here.
I thought of that.
What do you say? What was that? What? Of course I am.
Imagine that.
On and on.
I hear you.
Madam President, members of the board, we have for you, for your consideration, the governing board's current policy CBI entitled Evaluation of Superintendent. I purposely did not call this a first read because although we have had this policy for as long as I can remember in this district, we have not used the corresponding evaluation tool that is the exhibit to this policy. And let me see if I can make this a little easier to follow. This evaluation tool. And for anyone who's not familiar with the way that ASBA did their comparison document for us, this shows, let me go back up to here. The black shows what our policy says currently, and the red is where we have language that ASBA's model does not. The green is kind of confusing, so I'm going to gloss over that for a minute. And then the blue is what ASBA has in their policy that we do not have. So it's a little color-coded here. You'll notice that the entire exhibit is in red and crossed out. That is what our current SUSD exhibit looks like. And then finally, if you go all the way to the bottom of this document, the blue, where the blue starts again, is what ASBA's recommended exhibit slash evaluation tool is. What we wanted to do today is give you a chance to look at the compared language, have a discussion about what you would like to see. I can talk a little bit about how things have gone in the past for those of you who haven't been through this before, but really wanted to get your feedback on what you would like to see in this policy and exhibit and how you would like to have the evaluation discussion with Dr. Birdwell. Dr. Birdwell, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I do want to add in it, and there are a couple flaws behind it. A policy exists to, I always say this, policies are written to protect and guide school boards. It's really critical that you have a policy about evaluation that is set to a time frame that allows a board, when it's time to go different directions with their employee, that they have the opportunity to do it in a manner that allows the board to go out for a superintendent and also allows the superintendent to go out for another job. So there are 2 times that superintendents are really evaluated. One is in December, because it's where, if we have philosophical differences, we need to have a conversation. The other time is in June, because it's tied to the performance pay, and it's at the end, we see how well we've done. So it's sometimes misleading, because you think, well, gosh, it's December, it's the middle of the year, it must be just a mid-year update. But in reality, because of the sequencing of contracting, it actually is the final evaluation or the formal evaluation of a superintendent in December, so that you can actually make a determination of whether or not you're going to continue a contract. That's a critical time frame from an aspect of contracting. And it's tied into, because that you really just kind of had, it's a courtesy to give them enough notice to go make a decision of, we're letting you know we're probably not going to be renewing your contract, and if you want to formally say you're not seeking renewal, it's just that formal process from hiring, and that where I think is important. Now, second to that, a couple weeks ago, I went to the superintendent's conference on Sunday, purposely to have conversations with superintendents about evaluations in Arizona. And to ask, because they were having a group get together and look at evaluations, I thought, well, I'm going to join in on that conversation, because I had seen this, and it's unusual. The one that had been in our model probably was an alignment at a time, but things have changed, the state has changed, performance pay has been added. There was a piece in there that really stood out, like affect, the superintendent, goal number 4 was to be able to affect legislation. That is a very unusual goal.
Yeah.
But the first one was great, improve student achievement, loved it. Improving the operations of the district certainly makes sense. Improving the financial status of the district. But that last one, though, was improving the state legislation. That's unusual. So the conversation in this at the superintendent's conference really revolved around the fact that most evaluations for superintendents, 99% of the time, are done in an executive session. 99% of the time they are reflective. 99% of the time there isn't a formal document. Now, there's pros and cons on that, but the reason that there hasn't been formal documents is because for a while in the state of Arizona, public records requests went just absolutely crazy, and there was a debate on whether or not a superintendent's evaluation is a public record. The only public records protected in evaluations under the statute are teachers. So superintendents moved all their evaluations in, they kept them in executive sessions, because then they were protected under the executive session laws. So there was a huge shift in the last 10 years in the discussion over principals' evaluations and assistant superintendents' evaluations and superintendents' evaluations, because those are questionable on whether they're deemed protected or not. Now, there's an argument with attorneys on both sides of that, and being someone who has had their evaluation called for from the public, I like that executive session moment because I like to have reflective practice. And I think if you're going to have reflective practice, you have to have honest dialogue, and honest dialogue should allow for critical comments without the public weighing in on them. So, that said, twice I've worked with governing boards on writing superintendent's evaluations. I worked on one in Dysart, and I worked in Higley when I was the assistant superintendent for human resources. Arizona doesn't necessarily have great models, but they do have some out there. They're typically also based on the ISLIC standards, so the international leadership standards that typically are out there. And that's what you see when you start reading these. A lot of these come from the ISLIC standards. We are moving our principals to a McREL evaluation, and I believe McREL also has a district-level evaluation tool as well. When the state moved to highly performing, developing, non-performing, one of the things that superintendents began to do was also try to align theirs to the labels that we were giving teachers and we were giving principals. So there's a need to do some work on this. That said, we should have a dialogue about it and have a conversation about what an evaluation instrument should look like. And I would say that it's not something we can fix immediately, but I think as we go forward to the future, it would benefit the district to put some serious thought into, is a tool important? If it is a tool, it needs to be used. If it's in board policy, it should be used. And what is that process? Is it a reflective process? Is it a numerical process? And to do that, you may want to take some time to have that conversation. So in removing the reference, I think that what you do is you allow yourself time to actually develop a tool or adopt a tool or review some tools to figure out what we want to do. It doesn't mean that we don't get to evaluate, however, come December, because we still get to do that. And we still need to do that, no matter what. That's my 2 cents, and I look forward to evaluations. I know that sounds strange, but it's a great opportunity to reflect.
I'd like to make the suggestion that we go ahead maybe and focus on the policy language, especially that kind of red, green, blue section. Get some clarity there, because I think it's important, our board, and that's not necessarily related to the tool specifically, but let's maybe do that first.
Sure.
And then go into the tool discussion. And again, just kind of, I think today is about getting direction from the board regarding that tool, what it might look like. So we want to focus in on that red, green. What I see in that red and green language is probably consistent with the SAA dates and timelines to a degree. The principals, the administrators agreement is, am I wrong on that in recognizing those dates and language?
Are you looking at the May of the?
The May, right, the April, this April day, is that statutory?
That's
Or-
yes,
but
that
it's
may-
consistent with agreements of the past, is that right, or no?
That May language is statutory in terms of how far out from the end of the contract with the superintendent. That's specific to that. Pam, I don't think it
No, that doesn't
aligns
apply,
with-
no, that doesn't
Yeah.
apply to the principals or other administrators in the
you.
district.
Okay.
No, but also earlier up in the, if we go to the
Yeah.
top, I still want to bring out 2 points. The superintendent shall provide each board member a copy of the evaluation instrument no later than November 10. And that's in our policy.
Right.
So that's why we were pulling out the instrument and looking at it and going, oh, this hasn't been updated for a while.
Well,
And-
and that policy language, we have not followed that in any recent memory of board members, that
And
Right.
any or any tool
And it
was
says that
presented to the board.
the board
That just
president will
didn't happen
schedule a
in
meeting.
this.
And anytime you write a policy and you put the word shall in, it's really important because it says you're going to follow it. So the board president shall schedule a meeting no later than December 18th, when the board will devote an executive session to evaluate superintendent's performance. See, we have a policy that is demanding that you take action.
Yeah.
And so it's really critical to not forget that those dates are tied in there. The date down below, Ms. Perleberg, is tied to then, if you are approving your superintendent's evaluation, that you, when you get to renegotiate the contract, and remember, we're in a 2.5-year contract, which means we are a 1.5 years out of contract, which means this April, we would be looking at a renegotiation of contract. So this is all tied to all of that process as well, so just to make sure that we understand those pieces in there.
Okay, Board Member Hartman.
So my only question related to the policy itself is, was that first sentence? Because we are obligated, whether we've done it or not, but we knowingly haven't not done it. In fact, I think it did happen last year, actually. But my question is, the superintendent shall, okay.
Are you
provide
talking
the
about, the actual evaluation?
No, I'm talking about the policy right now, the first sentence in paragraph 2.
Oh,
So the instrument no later than November 10th. So what is it that we can do between now and November 10th to be able to meet this? I mean,
well, I think the point is, that's pure sentence, copy of the evaluation instrument. Now, that has not been followed by this board in anyone's recent memory.
You have it right now.
We've,
And today's the
that's
ninth.
just the truth.
my
I mean,
concern.
our boards have not used that, our board members
Well,
haven't in years.
now that
so,
we
no.
know, we're obligated to do it. I mean, it's one,
Can you
So-
define
so-
obligation for us?
well, as a personal, I mean, it just says that an individual board member, we have a policy. Either we change the policy if we don't like it, or we follow the policy if we do like it. So we've got 2 options here. Either we need to come up with something, which, as Dr. Birdwell just articulated, it's actually very thought, to get a meaningful document is not 2 days' worth of work. So I'm just not sure what is expected of us to do, because I think this is a really important responsibility of the board. And so we just need to figure out how to then best tackle this.
So, I just, tomorrow is November 10th. And we did not notice this for action because we were envisioning more of a discussion. So unfortunately, hands are a little tied in terms of trying to do something to that specific language today. I don't think you really can, except to give us feedback and tell us what you would like to see. And, you know, in a perfect world, it would have been done, you know, far enough out, but it just wasn't. And so that's kind of what we're stuck with. But you all can still have the discussion and give us that feedback, and we can bring you back language as soon as possible and try to get this straight.
So you're not breaking the law.
Right.
I want you to understand that. So you're not breaking the law.
You're not.
But nevertheless, timing-wise, I think it's important to say, do you want to lock yourself into timeframes here? That's an important discussion to have.
Board Member Beckham?
I was going to say before Board Member Hartman was voicing her opinion, basically the same thing. This is a responsibility of the board. It's not about Dr. Birdwell, the person.
Right.
She just happens to be the superintendent.
Right,
of this.
absolutely.
This is a policy that is for evaluating the superintendent, and we have the
Right.
policy. Even if it wasn't followed, we are now aware of it. Knowing that I'm aware of it, I feel an obligation. I would expect then that whatever we have is what we would probably get on November 10th, and then knowing, and I would be in agreement, that that it needs to be evaluated and amended before we use something else. And to be able to do that by tomorrow, November 10th, or even by December 18th, may not happen.
Right.
So it's a document that is going to hopefully supersede, and this is something that could be around for 25 years.
Right.
So it does need to be thoughtful. So I would think that we would be doing an evaluation based upon what we have now. And if that, I don't know, is this that's all in red, the tool that we are using? I mean, that's what's in the documents or policy?
It is what our current exhibit is.
Okay.
It
so-
is not what we have used.
Used, right.
Right.
So I don't know, I haven't read through it,
Can I
but
paint
isn't
a
it
little,
something
can I
that
paint
we
a little
could
picture
use?
though, like in my
Please.
mind? Again, there has always been this evaluation tool or instrument in our policy. So the idea that we haven't presented to the board by November 10th all these years, or including this year, I guess really isn't accurate because it has always been within our policy. The reality is our boards have not chosen to use that instrument or provide those actual documents as exhibits for the evaluation, but it's been there. And I don't think we're breaking any policies by not using it. I don't think we broke any policies by not using it in the past. We wouldn't be breaking any policy not using it right now. But because technically it's been presented to the board by November 10th.
Let me
Well,
clarify that
well, I have
with
a-
you. There's a difference between policy and exhibit, so let me help you with that. You still have
Yes.
a policy and you need to follow policy. Exhibits, however, may be used or not used. They're an exhibit, they're an example. But there is a policy that says, tomorrow, I'm gonna give you a tool. The only tool in here is this, and it's not been used for years. So the question I ran to the poor president, bless her heart, is, hey, what do you guys use? Oh, that's an interesting dilemma, because everybody has changed. I don't think that Scottsdale is different. I mean, across this state, people have changed that process to a less formal process. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, it just has become that. That said, however, exhibit is purely an exhibit, and it's an example, and it's what ASB puts out there and says, here's your exhibit, and we can go into every district, see if there's an exhibit. Some have them, some don't. Paradise Valley's has no exhibit whatsoever. But your policy, however, there is an issue with that. And the problem is, when you tie yourself into specific dates, you don't have board meetings that always fall within those proper dates either. So it becomes a bit of a problem when you do that. However, I'm going to reiterate, the timing of a December meeting is critical and needs to remain there for the future, because it's important for boards to meet with superintendents in December because of contracting. That's really critical. So I would caution the board to ever get rid of the December timeframe.
Board Member Kravitz.
Do we have to have an exhibit? I mean, to me, I look at this, if it's something we're not using, it's a waste of paper and a waste of ink. So either we don't put something in, or we submit something that we are actually using.
I certainly would say that that's part of the discussion today. The reason for the discussion is boards of the past have not used this tool, not used this instrument as at all. They've not used a tool, period. So, nothing.
So it's based on the fields.
In the past, we've created letters, which I think is a common practice. We've created letters, and that is our public document. Board Member Kirby.
So I have two questions, and the first is I'd like to hear from Board Member Hartman and Beckham. I clearly heard you state the concern, and I agree with you, but I'm interested in, you have a solution that you'd like to put on the table. So let me finish. My second question, though, is, didn't we just have a meeting where we talked about like district goals and
Yes.
what was important?
For performance pay.
And this just says, the superintendent shall provide each member of the board a copy of the evaluation instrument. It didn't say the one that's on the next page, it just said the evaluation, so it could be any evaluation. Could we not, and it doesn't even say it has to be, it's just the instrument. It doesn't have to be completed necessarily,
Defined by-
right? So could we leverage the work we did already and then have Dr. Birdwell give us that instrument, that this is what we're going to be evaluating her on by December 18th, and still stay within policy? That's my suggestion for a solution, but that's just mine. And I'd like to hear Board Member Hartman and Beckham what's going through their heads as a possible solution.
Board Member Beckham.
I apologize, I did not read the exhibit, so I don't know what's in it. So my question is, what's wrong with it? Why aren't we using that? I mean, I don't know.
I'll let Dr. Birdwell comment on that. I think there's a reason our boards have never used that tool
Okay.
as exhibit.
what
How
it
it
is,
how it
it's
ended
not
up in
working.
there, I'm not sure.
Well,
But
it's-
Board Member, we'll
It's,
let-
before Ms. Hartman, if I could just interject two things. One, the evaluation instrument is outdated and gets into areas that are not aligned to the what we would call the international leadership, the ISLIC standards. So the standards have shifted over time, and these are not what is considered best practice in evaluating superintendents. So that's one of the pieces. And like I said, it is an exhibit. Back to a point that Ms. Kirby made, and I just want to reiterate that when I was, Sandra and I were speaking today about this, she was allowing me to do some reflection with her, but when you prepare for an evaluation in December, everything that we do during the summer, the workshop, the performance goals, the goals of the governing board, the data presentations by Dr. McCauley, all of that is all in preparation for a conversation that occurs in December. So all of that work that you've been doing and planning and visioning and directing this district are tied to that conversation. So all of that work that you did really should be brought into that conversation, because that outlined for the superintendent, here are the 5 areas we want you to focus on and that we're moving towards. So that work we did with Michael Lorsch, that was very specific in its direction. And that really is the conversation for what I would expect to have during an evaluation timeframe. It's not anywhere in here because we created that this year. So it's not an exhibit anywhere.
Board Member Hartman?
So that really does tie to a lot what my response was going to be, actually, to Board Member Beckham. So just a couple of thoughts. So there's no absolute process, but there are best practices or good governance in terms of both process and tools. And from a process standpoint, a good practice in a non-for-profit environment, and this actually does apply in the for-profit environment too, is that the president of the board, along with the CEO, superintendent, actually crafts something in advance. Now, the board president may take input from other board members, but the reason why is because the only person you're accountable is to us, right? Legal counsel shouldn't do it, HR shouldn't do it, because you're our employee. So it's our responsibility to set you up for success. And part of setting you up for success is being clear on expectations, and then having a great dialogue, not even just twice a year, but on a regular basis. But definitely 2 check-in points that drive to other systems, which is, just the overall process. So if we're going to do something with policy, I'm fine with the dates. I think we should be really clear on what that probably should look like going forward. Because once again, policy is about trying to drive behaviors that are in the best interest of the school district, the body that we're responsible for. Now, in terms of the tool itself, I would agree completely with what you were saying. There's no way we can accomplish this by November 10th. But for me, what that tool looks like, it usually has some key components. And because I was trying to figure out, I did actually look at this document, like, oh, this isn't even relevant anymore. So what should it look like? Is when I started going through all of our stuff, it should tie to, first of all, vision, mission, and values, right? We would expect a superintendent to be moving forward consistently with vision, mission, and values, okay? Those vision and mission actually translates into goals. So back to our work with Michael Lorsch and a lot of time we've been spending, those long-term strategic planning goals are really the goals it should tie to. And I went back, and we have 3 long-term strategic planning goals that have 4 subcomponents, and it falls under academic, fiscal and HR, and communication. And the reason why is if it's important enough for us to have these long-term strategic plans, right? If this doesn't happen in 6 months, 12 months, this is a long-term plan, then what you want to have happen is, this is our plan, then you want the superintendent to be accountable to that plan, and then she holds her direct reports accountable to that plan, and then they hold their direct reports accountable to the plan. So it just drives a behavior. So we've already got the substance of what this needs to be, we just need to capture it. The other piece that typically goes in an evaluation is just a high level kind of, there's usually a technical, functional, that relates to being, the key role, the functions of that role. And then there's a managerial component, which is about how do you manage. And that's it. I mean, it sounds easy, but to do it really right, it does take a little bit of time. I don't think it'd be difficult for us to do it, because I think we've got most of it. I mean, we could take our plan and then some ISLIC's best practices on the others, because that's just standard stuff on function and managerial. And then I would really recommend us to put the framework of it as an attachment, so that it does live beyond. Because the bottom line is, we should have a strategic plan that's long-term. We should have an evaluation that's tied to that strategic plan. So that's what we're driving systems in the school district. We want these outcomes, so we hold the superintendent, accountable, but I'm saying this in a supportive way, right? It's not that you do it or you don't do it, it's how are we doing in this? And then you take that feedback and then you work through it and you have a very similar conversation with your direct reports. So I think it can be a very valuable tool if it's done in the right way and it's tied to the right objectives and outcomes. Does that make sense?
It's kind of direct to me, but I do have some, I guess maybe, I'm not going to say another perspective, but a different perspective in that I think we still have to decide as a board, are we looking for documentation, actual documents that, and again, the idea of what is protected, executive session. I mean, I feel our board's always valued reflective conversations and dialogue, and honest dialogue. And when, at least for my type of brain, those are not necessarily part of a, scaling, on a scale of 1 to 5 or any sort of thing. It's more about a reflective, productive dialogue that makes sure we're going in the right direction with our superintendent. So I do struggle to see an instrument that, I mean, one, I want us to be thoughtful about, is this a public document or is not? What does it look like? How honest can we be on it so that it is really productive? And, you know, where does it really get us? Because it's, you know, boiling down these types of things, you know, down to numbers is just obviously not something my brain wraps around very well. So I'll add that perspective.
Okay, so
Board
I'm
Member Kirby.
going to answer Board Member Hartman. Like, this, back to our Colby training. You're up here, and I completely agree with you. I have had such a tool for myself, so I completely understand that. But you know where I'm at, I'm down here. I'm like, we've got till tomorrow per our policy. And this is policy, and I do feel we have an obligation as a board to commit to policy that's already written. To you, your question of documents, no, I've had a superintendent who would provide this much paper, and it was fairly meaningless to me. So no, I don't want, I know it's education practice to, what do you guys call it, when you present? Not a portfolio, it's evidence.
Oh, evidence,
Yeah.
No, I was
I'm
actually
not-
referring to the instrument itself being a document.
Oh.
That's
No,
what I'm struggling to
okay,
picture.
I'm going to weigh in, we need an instrument, because it's best practice, it's private sector, anywhere you look, it's best practice. But I also believe we're probably 80% of the way there
Yeah, with
already,
Brett,
on the Michael Lorsch stuff we got.
That's what I
Although
think.
his stuff is not the long-term strategic plan. He was the short-term
The map.
anchors, which that, to me, that's really what you addressed through the performance pay. The strategic plan, which is the stuff that we really spent a lot of time, there's 3 goals we have with 4, 5, 8 things underneath it. That's what it should tie to, is that long-term strategic plan, which is what we spent a lot of time with, and Dr. McCauley actually spent a lot of time with, where it has, you know, it was all those requirements, exactly. That's what it needs to tie to. I mean, I did it last night. I went through and figured out over what it is, only because it doesn't take creativity. If we believe that's accurate, which we've spent hours, all it is lifting out the pieces and putting it over here.
Yep.
And then I'd like to answer the last question. I've only seen, and I've been part of performance management for 30 years and do coaching on it for nonprofits and governance boards, so it is best practices. The best evaluations, or productive conversations, are private conversations. I agree. They are not public conversations.
I think that's,
So
my point is,
keep
I
putting it in mix,
want
but
that
having
to be.
a tool in a policy is fine. Using it in a private session, an executive session, highly productive.
Yeah, completely agree.
So what I'm hearing is policy update exhibit is old. However, 80% of the work that we're talking about is here, and this is the December conversation, and I heard you say, and I couldn't agree more. The goal pieces, we've got the goal pieces, the metrics written. Functions management, we can go to the ISLIC, and really, they're pretty easy to pull. They're listed right there. So if we believe the exhibit is old, I'd like to take a blush at taking the work that we've done and put it together for December. We would not make the November piece, but I could send you these pieces to remind you what we have so that we meet the November 10. Hey, here's where we're at the moment. We're going to add some pieces to it. But I do believe that you've done 80% of the work of what you're looking at measuring. Because we do have it broken into performance versus long range.
Board Member Kirby?
Okay, so could you send us the 80%, the reminder?
Yep.
By tomorrow, November 10th? And then maybe 2 weeks later, maybe a week and a half, 10 days later, your design of a completed instrument with the ISLIC standards, et cetera, not necessarily filled out, but the tool by itself, just so we can maybe give you some feedback on the tool.
Yeah, that part's easy.
Okay, and then by the 18th, it's completed.
Sure.
Could we
Yeah,
do
because
that?
this is all on the computer. This is, so I can grab this and send it tonight. Good with that?
Yeah.
Board Member Hartman.
And I'll offer, if you just want a collaborative partner, board member to look at it, and, I mean, obviously, we all need to agree to what it is, I'm happy to do it. I mean, it's really not my favorite thing to do, but I do have a lot of experience
You
in
prefer
doing
bond
it.
information?
Actually, and I shouldn't say it's not my favorite. When it's done really well, then it's a great tool. Which, that's what we're gonna do.
Right. And I think, as I said, I just want to stress that, you know, my input is about making sure that dialogues are always honest and productive. I mean, we've all filled out those, and I guess that's where not having a different example, I mean, what I'm picturing in my head right now is one of those, on a scale from 1 to 5, did they achieve this? We all know how hard that is to fill out, and honestly, and it really be meaningful when you're either filling a survey out about a principal or filling out a survey, you know, it's not meaningful. And I think, I love the idea of creating something that's reflective, and that brings us to strong dialogue, and definitely tying it to all the work we've been doing. That is excellent, so I think we're there. All right.
So,
Awesome.
that paragraph update from ASBA, though, is critical to what you redlined, that we do get that back to the board for an update on the policy, but I think the exhibit, we figured out what we're going to do there, so
Yes.
I think we're good, so we appreciate that you brought that forward, but we do need to update that portion at the bottom. Basically, the law had changed since that's been updated.
And I just wanted to point out, I've highlighted here in the current policy, the language about the superintendent contract being in its first year. Now, this contract, the current contract for Dr. Birdwell, the first term was the first 6 months of this year, but it's still technically in its first year. That the initial eval would not necessarily be comprehensive, but more of an opportunity to have a discussion. And her contract actually fits with that in that it says, you know, that the formal evaluation will be in June of each year, but that the board shall devote at least a portion of one meeting between November and January during each term to a discussion with superintendent of the working relationship between the superintendent and the board and the superintendent's progress on agreed upon goals. So even the language that exists kind of contemplates a less formal initial around December timeframe, and then something more formal in June.
The puzzlement there, Ms. Becker, is because it's how the contract was written, because we did a mid-year contract. So we started the contract in January, so it's in its first year, which allows us, because what they're trying to say by that is, have you had a full time to work with the superintendent? So you've had 1 year. So it's almost like doing a mid-year update.
But then if that's the only language for this, because it's a multi-year contract, does it, the language change? Because you had just mentioned how important it is that your formal is in December, so that if.
No, to your policy to have that when you are in a normal cycle, you want to keep that long-term as you go forward as a district. Those are not bad things to have. What the language does is it allows you, when you get into a situation like we are with me, where we have a mid-year start of a contract, the flexibility for the board to be less formal in the first year and more formal in the second year. So it takes care of both scenarios.
And so that formal then moves up after that first year to
Correct.
December.
Allows you
I
opportunity.
just, and that's what the contract says.
Right.
Okay. I was just making sure they both were consistent.
We're matching each other.
Okay,
Alrighty.
anything else?
Thank you.
Thank
If
you.
not, thank you very much. Need to clean out that little part of board policy, yeah.
Working policy.
Got the broom out.
We will move directly to action item 4A, approval of guaranteed maximum price, GMP, for RFQ number 17090, construction manager at risk services for the new rebuild project at Pima Traditional School.
Wow. Governing Board. President Proberg.
I'm sorry, but I drank too long.
Dr. Birdwell and Sandra, thank you very much. this is, it's really a great pleasure to finally get to a point that we have a project that we have one GMP. It's not without a great deal of work, though, and I appreciate the opportunity to bring to you today the proposal to actually approve the GMP for the Pima School to be constructed. I have some patient folks with me tonight, the architects and also the general contractor, that if it wouldn't have been possible to go through this and have one GMP without their support. Just as a bit of background, I've given you more information on this one than you probably have ever had on a construction project. I've given you a scope of work, a summary of the GMP, the schedule and values, a list of the plans, clarifications, and even a project schedule, because I think it's very important that when you have one single GMP that you understand as a board every aspect of what we're spending the money on, what are the stages that we spend the money on, what is the impact going to be on the school. And so it's very important for you to understand what that is. And if you didn't get a chance to read the dissertation, which it almost is, that's okay, because we can go through some of that tonight as we go through this. Now, just to give you a little bit of background, on June 20th, you actually approved the pre-construction for CMAR for the Pima School to be rebuilt. And at the same time, the board approved CORE as a general contractor, in addition to approving the contractor's profit, which was done at the same time. All that was done on June 20th. Now, on Tuesday, October the 31st, I know that I've listed in here that the district met with CORE. Well, the district consisted of Laura, it consisted of Dave Gonzalez and myself, and we sat down with CORE senior management and negotiated the terms and the price and the agreement for this GMP. And so what I'm pleased to bring to you now is that the GMP that we're asking you to approve for the $18,107,142 is the total one GMP to construct Pima. I do have quite a bit of information here if you want to go through some aspects of it. I actually have one of the architects, and I failed to tell you that one of the reasons we were able to expedite this is we, at the decision and support with Dr. Birdwell, we put two design architects together to do this build. We put Arcot Winslow and Hunt Caraway together that brought this together, so it expedited it. I'm also pleased to say that we have the drawings into the city as we speak. They have already been redlined. We've already adjusted those red lines and they've gone back. And they were minor. They were actually minor red lines that went back. So we've never been in this position before on one of our construction builds. So I'm pretty geared up for this one. So it's really good. Do you have any questions that I can just address? And since I do have the architect and I do have CORE here, we can actually drill down on anything you'd like. Otherwise, I'm open to questions.
Board Member Beck?
Would you please go over the school square footage and just give us kind of a narrative of, the enrollment, how many classrooms, and give us an idea of what it is that we would be approving
Sure,
the
be
GMP
glad
for.
to. I knew that was going to be. We have, right now, there's 409, correct me if I'm wrong, 494 students in the school. This school is 67,500 square feet. We actually reduced some sizes in this, but we've made an allowance on this particular school. So I'm going to show you on this board. I'm sorry for the audience here. But if you see where this square juts out, that's actually 4 classrooms. and we've actually taken those out. But we've actually made a provision for all facilities to be there, that if we have an additional attendance growth, we can build that pretty quick. In addition, we have, you can't see it where you are, but here, we can add another 8 classrooms. However, had a discussion earlier and said, well, when you build a new school, what is the natural extra growth you have? Because I want to send my child to a new school. The number was 50. However, we could handle 100 comfortably right now, even with the size that we're building. And there's always an issue with the state on overcapacity. I mean, we have some schools that we have overcapacity right now. And so we want to build smart. We've got 8 schools that we have a responsibility to try to build here for the district. And so we have to be smart about what we build for what we have there attending the school right now. Let's see, what else did you, Ms. Beckman, what else would you look at?
Board Member Beckham? So from what I understand, by providing, if we vote this resolution in the GMP, there still is some room for a few changes from the site plan. Is that true, or is this the site plan?
The buildings themselves, structural drawings are in. The city's approved them. Structural drawings, the structures themselves, even with the elevations that you see in front of me here, that's set. What can be changed is something like playgrounds or locations for playgrounds. Where you see it looks like a road going through from the north to the south, that is set. That's adjacent ways, and that's a fire lane that goes through that location. The things that can be changed are things like landscaping, things like the playground equipment, and things like that. But the rest of it's pretty much set. You know, so any ideas or concepts says that, well, I don't like that elevation. Well, we don't want to get into that again. But it's pretty well set.
Board Member Kravitz?
On page 61, where it says allowance number 4, reroute utilities, $250,000.
Right.
Rerouting existing, is that a euphemism for burying the electrical lines?
It is. What we did was we put a placeholder in.
Right.
We're negotiating with the utility companies right now. Right now, when you take a look at the site, the utilities go straight through the middle of the site in an aerial fashion. So what we did, we put a placeholder of $250,000 in there. If the utility companies can't oblige us in some aspect of that. So that should be the maximum that we would have to pay if we had to do that.
Oh, okay. I mean,
So
I had
we're
asked
hoping
about that before,
Yeah,
so
we're hoping we don't
if I
have
sound
to.
like a broken
By the
record.
same token, you see in there's $100,000 in there with AT&T.
Right.
So I'm negotiating that. So I'm trying to use some AT&T
Okay.
leverage I've had in the past
Okay.
to be able to leverage
Great.
that.
Thank you.
Board Member Hartman?
Thanks. I just have just a couple questions from the contract. The first one's just on page 58. I'm looking at Exhibit B1, summary of the GMP.
I'm sorry, what is the page?
They don't, he doesn't have, that's the,
Oh,
It was
okay.
58 in the board package.
The cover
he
page.
doesn't.
Oh, you don't have that, the cover page?
Yeah, I
Okay.
got it. I
Okay,
got it.
great. And I know we've already covered this, but this is really just reminding me this
Okay.
answer. My brain seems to have forgotten this too. Item D, which is general conditions, which is the $975,295. Right above it, it says the general conditions fee includes bond and insurance costs. Is there something else that's in general conditions other than bond and insurance costs?
Bonds, insurance, and setup, and John, if you want to touch base on a little bit, you can expand on it, but bonds, insurance, setup costs, the fencing, and setup.
Sorry. Thank you, Board. I'm John Thomason with Core Construction. That also includes our site supervision, our superintendents, our assistant superintendent, our project managers, our trailers, the sanitary sites out on site. It's our
Okay.
manpower on site also is including those items.
Okay, thank you. I just
You're
wanted to
welcome.
clarify that.
Thank you.
And then the very next page, if you have the next page, under contingency, the last section on 60, it said escalation contingency is not included in this GMP. And just in our last meeting, we had talked about high potential of escalation. So I'm wondering what your
Okay.
feelings are on that for this particular
Okay.
project.
So right now, being we know where we're at with the start time and what we're negotiating with our subcontractors, we're locked in for the duration of the schedule. That's one of the requirements of the bidding when we know it's there. If it's, ongoing, we don't know the time frame, a decision, that's when we will put escalation allowance in. But we know the contract will be starting it very soon, if approved, and then we've locked the subcontractors in with our cost right now.
Okay, so, but everything's not locked in right now in terms of, there's the subcontractor costs and the material costs, right?
I will say we go somewhat on a limb to get our rates in here, our bid costs now.
Okay.
Because we have to get our best rates for you.
Okay.
So we've kind of pre-negotiated where we haven't signed contracts because we can't legally.
Until.
But we've been notification with our low subcontractors to get the best possible price for the district. And with that, it's, the quote unwritten requirement, you're locked in with your price for the remainder of the job.
Okay.
Yes.
So am I hearing you say that you don't reasonably expect additional escalation contingency?
No, on this
requirements?
project, we do not.
That's what I was trying. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. And then one last question. It's on page 65, so stay.
Okay, go ahead.
It's line item, it says line item 2, hazardous material abatement, and then B, what's excluded.
Oh, we can just talk to that.
Okay, would you say it one more time,
The
please?
abatement.
It
The
talks
abatement.
about what's excluded, and what's excluded
Yeah.
is the K building, the removal of relocation of school contents from buildings, abatement things, demolition and removal hazardous materials, third-party air monitoring and final air clearances. And so they're excluded from this, so it's just.
No, that is,
Board Member Hartman, what's the page you're looking at?
65.
65? 65? It's the abatement of the building, and which was an exclusion.
no, then that's incorrect.
Yeah.
She's referring to
I didn't go. I'm sorry, it's line item?
It's B, the very bottom of the page. There's listing of what's excluded, and there's 4 items.
Is there, I'm sorry, is that on a core document, says page like 6 of 20 by
6 of 20,
Exactly.
yes.
Thank you.
Line item
That's what
2.
we're trying
Okay.
to
Thank
work
you.
out here.
It's better.
So included, so we have the full abatement for the entire project, with the exception, and when you get down to B excluded K building, that was pulled out, and I believe that will be coming before you as a jock contract at next week's meeting. Now, am I
Next
right?
week, on the 14th.
Yes, at next week's meeting. They pulled that out, so that would actually be an early start to get going, because K building has to be removed before we can start construction. And so building K is excluded from this contract, is what it's saying. Because they originally, as when this GMP was put together, it was not going to be approved in time before we had to, or it was going to be approved before, excuse me. We need to get K building out of the way first, because it is where the footprint of the new classroom building goes. So we needed that one. It's going to be a separate price on a job contract, JOC, Job Board of Contracting, to you next week's board meeting, I believe. So that will be a separate line item contract, so it's not included in this one.
Okay, so then the total cost of PIMA is we'll need to look at this plus whatever this JOC is when we're managing.
Yes, I believe that is how the district is tracking that.
Okay, so we'll have that next week then?
Yes.
Okay.
Board Member Kirby?
Okay, thank you. What is the current square footage of Pima versus what we're building? One of you said 67,500. Is that what we're building?
Yes.
Okay, do you know the current square footage?
I don't know off the top of my head. Would you know, Tom? Yeah.
Okay, can we find that out?
Sure.
Please. And then, probably a question for Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Kind of back to this budget that we
Yes.
were just on.
Yes.
Can you, what is, it? So you're managing the entire bond over 7 years, right? What is currently in your budget that's going to be paid for by bond dollars, so exclude adjacent ways for PIMA?
The PIMA adjacent ways is, do you remember?
We got it here.
We're quick without looking, I think it's about
Okay.
640,000.
650 or something?
645, 691.
691?
Adjacent ways.
Okay, so what's your budget?
17,354,000.
And that excludes adjacent ways, right?
Yes.
Okay, 17,354. What have we spent to date or owe for services already received, for example?
79,000, that would have been through October. Just very little.
Okay, so you have it? It's 70. So that includes the plans that are already at the city? Or is that, or is,
That's what's been coded to that building, yes.
okay,
We
but,
won't have paid those fees yet, they just put them in, so the bill isn't, the invoices.
Yeah, we've not been billed yet.
okay, so what is the expected build? Do we have an estimate on what's still coming? Because, I mean, if it's 10,000,
I've
it's not a
got
big
two
deal. If it's 500,
architects, yeah, I've
it's a
got
big
two
deal.
architects working on this, so.
So we don't, okay, so you said it was 70 plus.
Yeah, it's like 80,000 so far.
So, okay, but we, all right. And then we're looking at a GMP of 18,107, but it's really adjacent ways will pay for 700,000 of that, correct? So what's that math?
17,354,000, and about 354,000 is around the owner's contingency that's included in that. So you're looking at about 17 million now.
So you have an owner's contingency, and you also have the contingency by the contractor.
Right.
And the reason their contingency is low is because we already have the
Because we
plans.
know so much.
Yes, and they're already into the city. We know what the red lines are going to be, so their contingency is relatively low, unlike what we've had in the past.
Okay, so I guess what I need to know is, yes, I'm clearly here, 70,000 has been coded as of.
80,000, yeah.
80,000 has been coded as of October 31st.
Yes.
I just need to know from what other bills are coming our way for services already rendered on this project that haven't been coded. And I just need to know is that, I don't need the exact number, Laura, I just need to know, is it 10 grand or is it 800 grand? Does that make sense?
That's been incurred that we haven't been invoiced yet?
Yes.
Give me just a second, let me look
Well,
at it.
are we approving this?
You
today?
can see what we have.
Yes. Meanwhile, Louis, I know that Dennis came up and gave you some square footage
Yeah.
numbers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so square footage is 70,107.
Today?
Yes. And the cost for the abatement and the demo is 107,000.
That's for the K building?
Yeah,
It's
just
gonna
for
be
the
a
K
sep-
building.
That's a separate contract?
Yeah.
So we need to add that 107
Into
into.
the-
If you want a total
budget.
build cost, you could add that 107 into that.
Okay, so if I'm following, can I, we have 18,107, 142 minus, let's just call it 700,000, is that okay for adjacent ways?
650, say 650.
Well, is it 650, 691? or
645, 691, so.
Oh, 645,
645,000, yes,
Okay, I thought you went from 645 to 691, okay.
I get it.
So 18,107, 142, back out 645. And contingencies, I'm not willing to just take those out.
They're part of the budget.
They're part of it.
Especially when you're dealing with abatement, so.
It would,
K-building is an add 107,
107, that's correct.
we're at 17,560. We have $80,000 spent to date, 80,000.
Yeah, and in October, I only paid $2,500 on that bill, so I'm looking at actuals, and it should have been closer to at least 100 and 150,000. That's what I'm thinking I'm safe to add. I'd put 200,000 that they've earned that I haven't gotten the invoice for,
Okay, so
because they're running behind.
I'm at 17,710,
Okay.
but this GMP, but your budget is at 17,354. So if we backed out the owner's contingency, we'd be there, basically.
Yeah, it's tight, but we're far enough along that
Our risk is much lower because we've got the drawings actually in and approved. And we've already been speaking with the utility companies on what they can and can't do. And the other portion that has to do with AT&T. So we got a lot of knowns now that we've never had before when we've gone through this process.
So if we do have all of those knowns, why do we have 355,000 for contingency?
Because you don't know.
That's not much.
When it comes to construction, yeah, it's really
And
not that
$17
much.
million, that's not very much.
I know,
Yeah.
but
It doesn't have to be spent, it comes back to us.
Yeah, it comes back to if we
I
don't spend it.
understand that, unless we run into, on the one hand, we're saying, we know everything, we're feeling really confident about it, we're not gonna spend that money. So then I ask, well, then why is it in there? Well, there's a lot of unknowns. So you see the dilemma I have?
Unfortunately, in construction, it's not like manufacturing, where you know what your raw material goods are, what your incurred cost is, and what your output's gonna be for a fixed price. In this case, the variables have to be with conditions that we don't know what we're gonna get into sometimes in construction. Maybe the footings, maybe we can't get a compaction just right. We gotta bring in more soil that we can do a compaction right. And that's a compaction for each one of the sites, not just one. So we don't know what that's gonna look like yet, but we're pretty sure based on some of the core tests that we've done. So you have to have some contingency in there to actually take up for some of those things. I've been in that before. Dr. Birdwell's had a school before that they didn't do compaction right. And we thought that they did compaction right. And I helped her to sort that school out at Higley, where the kitchen floor was cracking up. And they didn't prepare the plumbing right. We had to go back in and do the plumbing right. But it was mainly on the compaction of that floor. They didn't get that right in the settlement. So you have to have it.
So I guess, I'll let it go because we're close, but if this is truly, we're kind of in the best scenario, is what I heard you say at the beginning. We already had the plans, we went back from the city, everything's moving along really, really well. It needs to come in. It needs to come in $400,000 better. Because that's, if we have so many knowns, I've listened to you, I heard you, we have one GMP, we're through the process, everything's tracking. So if it comes in higher, or if we end up eating up that owner's contingency, in my mind, that will set my mindset for future decision-making on the projects to come. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you have to hold me accountable for that.
Thank you, that's what I'm trying to say.
Board Member Hartman? And just to make sure, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, 'cause we're on budget if we don't use contingencies. If we use contingencies, whether it's owner or contractor, we're over
Well, we
budget.
can use, I think we can use, by my quick math, based upon the numbers that were given to me, we just have to preserve the owner's contingency. If we also preserve the CMAR's contingency, then we've now beat budget.
That's right.
Is that right? Okay.
And can I also say that when we go through this process, there's still value engineering that takes place from CORE and us to try to see if there's areas that we can reduce costs.
Awesome.
I mean, they did that when we were going through the other school process, not mentioning the school, and significant value engineering came out of that. There's additional value engineering that's already been used in this. So from the day we start, value engineering will start.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is that just because we're approving this at 18107 doesn't mean we're going to spend 18107. And I know you've said it before, but I want to reiterate that. It's a maximum.
Guaranteed
Guaranteed, yes.
maximum
Maximum.
price.
That's right.
Got it. Thank you.
Board Member Beckham?
But I just want to be clear too, so you're saying that this is the budget for the construction side. It's not the total budget. So you've got to add back in your architectural budget?
That's what I asked her.
Yeah,
I added it in.
I think we're going to be fine.
No, the total, well.
What I have
and that's what I'm
spent is for
afraid
all
that
of
is-
it. All of it that has been spent is what I said. That includes what I paid for all services for that location.
Right, but that's not what I
This
think you're talking.
GMP,
You said 200,000.
yes, that's what I'm expecting that they have earned so far that I haven't been billed for
This
on the architect.
This GMP is for the construction of the building. It's not all the costs of the project.
So what other costs are you aware of
There's-
that's out there?
$1,260,000 for the architectural
the
budget.
architect.
19,000 for procurement budget, other budget ASBS.
I don't think that will happen. I can
Right, but
give
I'm
you the
just saying that
cap on
that's
the,
what's
that was
down
a
there. I
budget.
don't think that,
Right.
I was getting the impression you were saying this 18 is the total project budget.
That's what I was saying.
That's
So
what I thought. That's not. This is
This is the GMP.
for core construction only.
Yes.
It's not the project
It's not
budget.
so can you understand what I'm asking though, Laura, right? I just want to know
The
what is
cost
the
to build the building minus the adjacent ways. But there was an architectural budget and there was a procurement budget.
paid for out of what? The bond?
Right now, it's attached to this building. If there's room in the bond, we can do it there. If not, we'll do it somewhere else.
Where else?
We have several funds that we could use it from.
The indirect cost.
Just like I don't have the site, I don't have the furniture, the FF&E in here.
No, you
But
don't.
no, I think to the point, Laura, what I'm hearing the board say is, they had put out a summary that total cost build of these schools would be 18 million, and what I'm hearing you say is we're above the 18 million, which means that the GMP, add the architectural fees, ran this higher than what we had said we would do.
The original.
Then you back out the adjacent ways, how close to the 18 million are we at? I mean, I'm not trying to tell you to do the math
No,
right now, but
okay.
that's what we're talking about. Because
Yeah.
when you ask the board to approve an $18 million project, that assumes the entire project, because that's what we told the voters we would do. So if we're not there, we should not take action tonight. And I hate to, I know you all have been waiting a long time, but the
Okay,
reality is we.
it's less than $9,500 is what we spent on the procurement. That's already paid, that's gone, that's part of the expenses to date.
Okay, so it appears to me that we need a very clean dollar conversation about this, and that this is probably needs to be tabled until Tuesday night.
And some of the year-to-date is asbestos removal that was coded to this project that has been paid. And that is $22,446 we have spent. That could go into another category off this rebuild.
That's, Laura, I understand that we have flexibility of funding, and I totally get that, and I always appreciate that you say, well, it could come from this fund, or this fund, but the reality is, I'm gonna go back to the issue that I'm hearing the board saying, and I clearly understand from them, 18 million is for an entire project.
Construction project.
For an entire project, including the architect. Architect, everybody is at the 18, and we're not there. We're not there.
All in.
Okay.
All in, we're higher than 18.
I'll just say, on the past GMPs, we didn't include the architectural fees.
And we've had some discussions that is already pushing the budget. When you start totaling first build, second build, third build, we're beginning to find ourselves of eating on the eighth building. And that is the problem that we're having right here, right now. So did the square footage get removed from that building that we removed from Hopi? Did the gymnasium, is those equal? Is that building equal to the building that we built at Hopi?
It's been reduced, and that's included here.
And that's included in the cost savings.
Board Member Kirby?
I agree with tabling it until Tuesday. I'm not, this board member is not opposed to using other funds. But we need to know that and what those fund balances are, and if we spend that money, what will we not be able to spend that money on to make those fiduciary decisions?
That, well, it's part of the bond, that is part of a school environment, it's abatement. Right? So,
You're talking about moving into a different portion of the bond.
Yes.
But what I would like to do, I don't think there's a difference, is there a difference between today and Tuesday? For you, for core, I mean, we're going into can you give us, I would like to be able to have just a very simple budget that says this is how we're gonna fund each of these, and our team to be able to put that together. I'm sorry, but I
okay.
understand where they're coming from on
No,
this, and I
it's
think
okay.
we've got to talk about it.
Yeah.
So as far as we're concerned, the thing is the schedule. We were going to start abatement of K the 20th, which is, I believe, the week of Thanksgiving, and demo building K that week. Then we had a week and a half or so of getting the rest of the site fence put up, and then starting the construction 12, 8, 9, 10, 12, 11. Originally on the schedule, the reason we were doing that, and this was all predicated on board approval, originally we were going to start 12/26 is what the master schedule had us starting. Day after Christmas, obviously that meant we weren't going to do anything for a week, let's be real. But with the board approval, with Orcutt, Winslow, and Hunt Caraway working together and getting the plans early, we were going to get about a 2-week head start, which really helped us because we've condensed this schedule so far already that we are turning over. So it just puts us probably back to 12/26 on the schedule. And,
Between now and Tuesday.
Yes. Or we can still go sooner. I mean, that's all. It will not hurt us.
Today's Thursday.
Right.
Tomorrow's a holiday.
Yes.
Tuesday, the board has a board meeting.
Yes, so we should be fine. We are actually, yeah, because we're going to release people after the Tuesday on K, and we wouldn't have been releasing people now, so that was for the full construction that we're going to start on 26. So no, that time frame will not. The only thing we were looking at is.
That's all they're asking for, is that they will bring it back on Tuesday.
No, it will not affect the schedule. Actually, it'll still help us, by letting us start a week or so early before Christmas.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
So,
No, I don't
well,
have to
I-
make those motions.
well, one thing, I mean, I want to kind of take a stab at clarity as well, because if the understanding of this board is that each and every build right now, it's been determined that the full cost, not GMP, obviously of the contractor, but the full cost
of the project.
cannot exceed 18 million. I guess that's where I'm not exactly sure where that was determined. I mean, obviously Hopi's budget was, we all know, was higher than that. I know the average was supposed to be, I think, 18 million. Is that correct?
It is really the average.
So what I guess we're looking for in each of this build and future rebuilds is to say that the GMP, the cost of the architects, any additional costs outside of the GMP and the architects, it's all in, minus adjacent ways dollars, needs to be 18 million or below.
Well,
Is that what we're saying? I mean, that's what I'm trying to understand what the goal is we're shooting here for. Board Member Kirby?
What I'm trying to say is the all-in costs for building a school, all in, everything, has to be on budget. And that budget flexes over time. Our budget, in the budget, it's constantly being updated. Our budget for this project, for Pima, all in, is 18 million. So I'm just trying to see, all in, are we at 18 million? And what I'm hearing is no, we're over.
No, but what I'm trying to understand is that all-in budget, minus whatever dollars we are going to use in adjacent ways dollars.
We're still over.
We're still
Right,
over.
we're
And
still
so-
over. That's
We're still
all I was
over.
getting clarity is that we are talking about the all-in price minus adjacent
Right.
ways dollars needs to hit 18 million or below.
And
Or
understanding
whatever the budget is.
that 18 was
Right.
the average
And it could be lower,
figure,
but yes,
right?
okay.
I mean, that was the average figure.
That's what I'm trying to get.
But if it's going to be higher, there has to be a discussion of, okay, well, hang on a second. If we were saying the average was 18, why are we above 18? Has construction costs gone up? Has materials gone up? How much so there's a bigger discussion. This is not reflective of please understand, it's not reflective of core. We, as a team, have to provide a better breakdown of, when we said the average cost was 18 million, and we're sitting here with an 18.5 or an 18.6, whatever that is, we need to be able to have an explanation for that. And so I just would say to the governing board, I need to sit with the team and talk through that. And if we're going to be coming back, and we come back to you and we say, yeah, guess what, we're going to start this project at 18.5, we have some makeup to do. Because then we have makeup on the next, are we getting a economy of scale as we go through the projects to make that up? How are we going to get back to the average? And now, we may be higher on this project, but then is the economy scale going to pay itself off in the next one and the next one so that we can beginning to see that make itself up?
So Dr. Birdwell, there's another area that we need to be able to address with you, and it has to be what was the original budget based on, that my predecessors actually put that number in that they did not include. You know, so their number may not have included some of these assumptions that we now have. So, you know, I can do what it was there and what it is now.
And I agree with you, Louis, and I understand that. It's that when the board has been put in a position where the public heard your predecessors' averages, now when we're not going to hit the average, we have to be able to explain that. Now, in this particular case, I also know we're bearing a whole lot of utilities that was not even discussed a year ago when those budgets were put together. And that's $250,000 of varying utilities. So, but I want to we should be able to say that. We should be able to say in the original, here are some extenuating circumstances that were not part of the discussion. They didn't have hurricanes back there. They didn't have fires that were going on in California. We know construction was at a different price.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, if this is 18.5, to the board's credit, they're trying to remember building number 8.
Sure.
And they're saying, is this going to be made up in economies of scale? And so we should have an internal conversation to be able to share with the board on that.
Okay.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
And it doesn't necessarily need to be building number 5, 6, 7, 8. You could say, we are reducing our transportation budget, which is currently sitting at 6 million, down to 5.5 million, and we're moving those budgeted dollars over to PEMA.
Or to what Laura said is there's an
As
abatement.
long as you keep the percentages, right?
You have to keep your percentage, but to Laura's point, when you talk about the abatement, it could go under
Environmental.
Environmental. Because we have all of these abatements that we're having to deal with. And so we take that dollar and we say this actually, so we have to break that down slightly different. Now, does that change Corps' bid? No, but it changes the overall conversation about approvals of budgets.
Sure, that's fine.
Can I add to that?
Board Member Hartman.
So I think I'm agreeing with what you're
she's
saying,
got
and
it.
it's almost like it's this rolling budget, but for me, what would be useful is, so if the number, if we were using whatever it is, 18.1 or 18.5 is the average, but based on our actual experience and what we've spent, that may become 17.8, may become 17.5, right? Because we still have a fixed amount. So I would be interested in knowing, based on our, based on actual, if that average changes, that average changes, right?
It does, and that's where we want to, but I think that's where we should be able to explain that to you, to say, hey, when these guys wrote this a year and a half ago, they put an average in at that time, and here was the cost of construction at that time. Here's what's changed since then, and we've added an additional bearing of utilities, and we have the additional,
It does not include adjacent waste.
right.
And he's got this broken out here. There's 3% included for FF&E, and he's at 18.8.
So that was, so when we were back in the days presenting this, we presented 18.8, because that was the form we presented, I remember that one. So,
18.8 average budget.
no, on that
For these-
particular one, when Terry broke this down, and he broke it down into the different categories, and he built in contingencies, remember we had a conversation about the percentages?
Okay.
And and Mrs. Kirby, to her point, she said, I know you've added in extras, where is it at? And so there was a 3% increase in those budgets to address cushions. And I think that that's what we're seeing in there, is we're seeing a cushion that was built in. So, they've already expressed that there isn't a difference between tonight and Tuesday. And I would just say that we should come back with a slightly different budget on Tuesday if the board would give us the grace of tabling this for tonight and let us bring that back to you. I think we could give you a much better explanation after we've had a conversation.
Okay, so let me just be absolutely clear on what we're expecting on Tuesday. So we're looking for this number with adjustments that actually shows what the extra costs are associated with the architect, any other adjacent ways, if there is anything like that, or any extra costs, so you have a total build number.
That is not what we're looking at.
Okay.
You're not going to change the GMP.
No, I'm not changing that,
Okay,
but you.
but what we need to do is be able to put a preload budget into that to explain the total cost of this build, what the architectural cost is, what the construction cost is going to be, and then a conversation with Ms. Smith to say, what portion of this contract, which portion is going to come out of which area of the bond?
Okay.
If there's a portion of this that's going to go, like the abatement, off into their area, to be able to show that so the board sees where the dollars are coming from.
Yeah.
So,
So on the summary, there it is broken out on the bond summary that the architectural budget is 1.26 and 20,000 for procurement, but it's done and it's at less than 10.
yeah.
So we now have two architects that the combined, I don't know that changed.
So I'm sorry, was the procurement cost paid through bond dollars?
Yes.
Okay.
So I clearly understand what we need to bring back, and I, again, we need an opportunity to come back and have a different conversation, so the board has a comfortability of approving this. This is not a reflection of the GMP, this is a reflection of overall budgeting of bonds.
Sure. But just to your point, and Tom can speak to this, there's no additional cost to having the two architects to do this job.
No, we're aware of that, but it's in addition to the GMP.
Sure.
So we're already above the 18 million.
Yeah.
And again, to the point, this person stood up in the public for an entire year talking about budgets and talking about what we were going to do and showing those slideshows. And so I just want the assurance that we can say, this is the dollar that we spent. Here's what we spent on architects. Here's what we're going to spend on the GMP.
Okay.
And it's, again, it's not reflection of any of the work, gentlemen. And Mr. Hartwell, your work on this is fine. It's a conversation of comfortability that a board must have before they pass a GMP.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not a reflection of anybody's work here. You all did a good job. It's just, we have to have a slightly different conversation before we approve it.
Duly noted.
Because it affects the next 7 bills.
Absolutely.
6 bills. This is number 2.
Board President, Governing Board, and Dr. Birdwell. I just want to clarify, though, bringing Orca Winslow in to expedite the process did not increase the fees. Hunt Caraway took some of their fees and redistributed to our firm to allow for us to give that assistance.
Great. That's
So-
terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to be clear on that Building K situation. So that will be an additional cost that we'll be seeing Tuesday night as well, above, beyond this GMP, and factored in. But this delay obviously has no effect on the removal of that Building K. We were approving that Tuesday night, and as long as we stay on that schedule, we're still good.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a question, so just for, if they are gonna table it, so
So
do
they
I?
have an action item, they have no motion, so it can die for lack of motion, or they can table it requesting that it come back on Tuesday.
No, that's what I'm asking.
Michelle, that's you. How would you like it handled?
Let's see.
Is it better to have it tabled and request to have it brought back Tuesday, or would you just like it to die for lack of motion?
I'd rather have you move to table it.
Okay. But Board Member Beckham, I think you have a question.
I had one quick question, and if you want to bring the answer on Tuesday, that's fine. When you figure out the square footage, the cost to square footage, so now that we're at 67,500, what number are you using? Is it the total GNP plus the abatement, or what number are you using to
The
figure that
total
out?
square footage of all the buildings.
Right, the 67,500.
That's correct.
But what number are you using, what dollar amount are you using to divide
You
it
mean
by?
per square foot? I'm using the 67,018 to give me a $285 square foot price.
So you're using, going to use the 18?
Construction cost.
That's
So the
right.
18,214,000, which is the total GMP plus the 107 for abatement?
No, the 107 for abatement was coming out of a job order contract.
No, but the abatement has to be done
No, I
to-
understand.
Yeah,
No,
to
I
build the
understand.
building, so I just
we-
didn't.
I can include that into that to give you a total price per
Okay.
square foot.
Okay, thank you.
But,
Board Member Kirby.
okay, but to that point, because there are members of our community who are looking at dollars per square foot.
Sure.
Should we not also include, I mean, I would actually prefer to include an all-in cost. It should be all in. Architecture, everything.
The only thing.
Well, but my concern with that is if the general public is wanting to compare apples to apples, and they use a construction cost per square foot, and it's not the norm to have in architectural fees and all of those things, then they're comparing apples and oranges.
Could
and
be
that
our
would
norm.
unfair to us.
Well, you can do two. You can easily do two numbers if you want to add in the architectural fees and whatnot.
The only thing I'll caution you on.
But I just wanted to be consistent that when you give us a number of the cost per square footage, that we are consistent.
I think it's one thing.
The only
Board
thing.
Member Kirby's point, let's be consistent.
Yeah.
And I know you've given that number in the past, and I now know that square footage has come down, so I'm just wondering what that is and what the
And the only thing I'll
variables
caution you on
So
is.
Tuesday is
We're
fine.
betting on the come that the SFB is going to approve and repay us for the adjacent ways. I mean, we have funds in place, but the SFB still has to approve that.
Okay, to that point, Mr. Hartwell, in the state of Arizona, this is the least amount of
Oh, it is.
adjacent ways they've ever approved.
Absolutely.
Normally, it's about $1 million per build, and they've already reduced that down to
Yeah,
about the
exactly.
700 to the 650. So I very much doubt you would have any problem with that being
Yeah,
approved.
I
Now, to
agree.
your point, however, we don't back it out of the budget until it is approved and they're actually agreeing to pay us. So we continue to show it, but it is part of the budgeting process. I appreciate your caution on that from a budgetary standpoint, but to think that the SFB is not going to approve the adjacent ways at all, that I have not seen in the state of Arizona at all.
So when I do your approval cost, we keep adjacent ways in.
Well, yes, because we
Right.
haven't been approved yet.
Exactly,
Okay,
exactly.
but let's just not
Yeah,
further
okay.
confuse the
Okay.
the issue.
Thanks
Okay.
very much.
You get it.
All right, so do I have or I will make a motion that we table action item 4A and revisit this action item on Tuesday.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Aye, motion passes 5-0. Sandy's not here. 4-0. 4-0.
Sandy had to run.
Oh, goodness, I'm sorry, I did not see, did not see that she had left the room.
So
4-0.
do I add this, Michelle, do I add this as another action item on the forecast? Well, no, this isn't printed yet.
Fine.
It's
even
going to
if
be
you
another
have-
action
matters.
item
Can we
with
keep going?
discussion, yes. Move on with action item 4B, approval of resolution for the demolition of 68th Street property. Dr. Birdwell?
Mr. Rayler has done a great job of preparing to have 68th Street demolished.
Poor guy, it's time to wake up. Oh, sorry.
Start putting them closer to the top of
You know,
the agenda
someday
occasionally.
we're going to put it at the top of the agenda.
I didn't even know I was talking tonight.
Oh,
I just thought I was here just to look
We're
good.
ready to take the action on Old Tunnelea, 68th Street.
Yes, and this item that's before you, I'm sorry, President Perleberg, members of the board, Dr. Birdwell, this item that's before you is really a housekeeping item. The School Facilities Board requires that we tell them that we're going to reduce our square footage in the district. So it's really our acknowledgement to the SFB that we are taking square footage away and that is it. They don't approve or deny, they just know that the governing board is behind the demolition of the school. And then they'll make their adjustments to their square footage in the district, and we're good to go. And then you'll see on Tuesday, our job order contract to do the demolition of the school.
Board
Yes,
Member
ma'am.
Kirby. Okay, so thank you for that. The same request applies that we just had on PEMA, will, for me at least, will apply for this demolition, whatever we're approving Tuesday night. It's an all-in.
Yep, no problem.
What's the all-in cost to demo whatever we're demoing? Because I think we're leaving, maybe you might talk about, we are leaving part of it.
Yes.
Of the property. And then what's the budget for that's being paid for by the various funds to pay for that demo? So you got it. Got it, okay.
And what you will see on Tuesday, we did not involve an architect in the design for the demolition. We have at the asbestos survey itself, we have the cost of the JOC, and I will bring a separate document for you guys to have for the total. But the cost of the inspection for asbestos, the abatement, the demolition, and that's it.
And then we'll have the
So-
budget.
And then, yes, and we're taking down all of the buildings except for the admin building that has that beautiful mosaic on the side of it. And we're basically trying to create a clean slate, if you will. And then we'll go back and decide, are we going to build buildings? Are we going to build soccer fields? Are we going to, whatever it is that the community needs immediately. We're going to leave the perimeter fence as much as we can. We'll have some gaps, obviously, because the fence dies into each of the buildings. So we'll close those gaps so that we've got a full perimeter so that we don't have any security issues later on. So you'll have a complete document, yes.
Thank you.
One quick question. I noticed in the list of things that are staying is the playground area.
Yep.
Does that actually have playground equipment on it at this time that
It does,
might be a
and
safety
our
hazard?
guys about 6 months ago fluffed the sand, just to make sure if you fall, you don't hurt yourself.
So are there children using that playground area? Is this
If the
a
field-
safe?
Yeah, so if the campus sits dormant for 5 years and it is soccer fields, it is a safe play area. And again, we're going to be looking at that building on restroom use, et cetera.
Okay.
So we're keeping the playground.
concerns
Now,
there.
if the playground was to deteriorate over that time, we will go in and remove it.
All right, Board Member Kravitz?
Has the administration building been renovated in any way since it was built in 1958? Are we solely keeping it to preserve mosaics? And if so, is there a way of extracting those mosaics?
Yeah, we checked into that. The extracting of the mosaic is about the cost of putting some restrooms in for the soccer players.
Oh.
So that mosaic is a very large, very expensive move, and a beautiful move, beautiful piece of artwork. However, that said, if there is to be a campus built in the future back on that campus, that would be able to maintain that mosaic traditionally. But currently, the desire is to just have it be soccer fields that we can rent out, and it would be great to be able to have a place where restrooms are available,
okay.
so that we have it properly cared for. That building would house those restrooms.
Right, yeah. Okay, and
would be renovated.
I see there were classrooms built in 2007. At least that's what it said. I mean, so that those are not,
Those classrooms for 2007 were actually 2 portable buildings.
oh, okay.
Housing two classrooms each,
Okay.
and they're now gone. They're
Thank you.
actually at Oak Learning Academy now.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing this forward. I know the community will be grateful to have that blight removed from their neighborhoods, so thanks.
You're welcome.
Board
See
Member
you on
Kravitz?
Tuesday.
I'm sorry, I was out of the room while you initiated the discussion. How are we paying for the demo? Because I thought all of our bond funds that we have been previously approved had been allocated already, so.
This is a new project coming forward. And way back in April, Danny O'Brien brought the list of projects.
So this was on there?
This was on there back
I
then.
just want to make sure.
Right.
Street was on
We just
there.
hadn't approved it,
Right.
but the allocation was made.
And the work that we're doing in the grand scheme of what had been allocated to the 68th Street complex or campus was upwards of $10 million. And so we're spending a very small portion, about $750,000 on just this segment
Oh, no, that's fine.
of
I
the
just
work.
wanted to make sure the
So-
funds, I couldn't
Yep.
remember the allocation.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, but there was discussion at the time of, yes, we use bond dollars for this, but always knowing that those dollars will be replaced and then some with the sale of our Indianola building. There was a kind of just little note, side note there, that's kind of a reminder that
This-
those dollars will be filled in plus
And I
that, so.
appreciate you, Brandon. The sale of the old district office facility is dollars that had been intended to be used on these construction projects. But 68th Street had always been part of the planning with bonds. The difference is, the other schools were removing and rebuilding, on this one, we're removing and leaving, because we're waiting for enrollment.
At this point, yeah. Makes sense.
And Dr. Birdwell, that number was 10 million on the original budget.
Yeah, I think it was because it was also determined that there might potentially be
Sure.
a small campus put back, and so there is extra dollars in the budget there at this time. And as I expressed last night to the bond committee, it may or may not be part of this bond cycle based on the enrollment and the growth of the southern end. So there are dollars sitting there that may be used on other projects down the road if the growth does not occur. But meanwhile, thank you, because between the rats and others, and we need to get that building down. Yes.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? And I would like to, I'm starting. I would like to make a motion that we approve the resolution for the demolition of the district's property located at 6801 East Oak Street in Scottsdale, Arizona, formerly Tonalea Elementary School. There's a motion, thank you. Thank you, Board Member Kirby, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. We're all here. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Second? Thank you, Board Member Hartman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Great conversation today.
I didn't get that.
And we'll